Step back with us tonight to Gravity Falls during one strange Oregon summer. On 15 June 2012, Dipper and Mabel Pines arrived in the wooded Oregon town of Gravity Falls to spend the summer at their great-uncle Stan's mystery shack. Before the first day had passed, Dipper had entered the forest, found Journal 3, and begun reading a record that changed the meaning of the quiet town around him. Warm bus windows blur the northern road from California on 15 June 2012, while the soft vibration of the road settles beneath you. You are traveling with 12-year-old twins, Dipper and Mabel Pines, towards a summer neither has chosen for themselves. Their destination is Gravity Falls, Oregon, a small town surrounded by thick forest, old roads, and the patient green darkness of the Pacific Northwest. Dipper sits close to the glass, expecting the weeks ahead to be dull, while Mabel leans towards every passing view with immediate enthusiasm. You see her bright attention move from roadside barns to distant ridges, from wooden fences to clouds gathering over the trees. The journey has carried you north for hours, through warmer country and wider valleys, until the landscape begins to rise and the pines draw close around the road. The bus glass is warm beneath your fingertips, though the air beyond it looks cooler and deeper than the Californian summer. Dust rests along the rubber seals of the windows, and sunlight moves in pale bands across the worn seats. Each turn gives the road a soft sway, followed by the steady trembling of the engine beneath your feet. Outside, dry grass leans in the passing wind, while darker trees gather along the hillsides. The changing landscape carries the faint smell of pine resin through a narrow opening near the driver's window. You sense the resinous sweetness mingling with dust, warm fabric, and the dry mineral scent of the road. Farther north, the light loses some of its hard brightness. It becomes gentler on the hills and settles quietly across the bus. At the edge of town, Gravity Falls appears between tall trees, with a weathered sign and a narrow main street opening towards the hills. You arrive in a place that seems ordinary enough to Dipper, whose first impression confirms his expectation of a tedious summer. Mabel, however, greets the town as though it has been waiting specifically for her. You watch her enthusiasm gather around every sign, shopfront, and unfamiliar face. The town offers cafes, souvenir stalls, faded buildings, and long roads leading towards forest. None of these things appears extraordinary at first. Yet the ordinary tourist town setting becomes the opening frame for supernatural events, and the quiet streets already seem to hold more than they explain. You are not yet shown the hidden shape of Gravity Falls. You are only placed at its boundary, where the road ends and the trees begin. A warm breeze crosses your face as the bus doors open, carrying pine resin, dust, and the scent of sun-heated timber. The pavement holds the day's warmth beneath your shoes, while the shaded ground beside the road feels cooler and softer. Insects hum beneath the Oregon trees, their small sounds blending into one continuous veil. A bird calls somewhere beyond the buildings, then falls silent. Overhead, the branches shift in slow layers, allowing narrow pieces of sky to appear and disappear. You hear the distant creak of a sign, the rattle of a loose gutter, and the gentle ticking of the bus engine cooling after its long journey. The air feels spacious around you. Even the silence seems to have distance inside it, extending beyond the road towards places that remain unseen. Great-uncle Stan Pines waits near the roadside in a battered vehicle, ready to take the twins towards the mystery shack. You follow Dipper and Mabel as they climb inside, carrying bags packed for a summer away from home. Stan is their great-uncle, though his manner is brisk, practical, and already occupied by the business that supports him. He operates the Mystery Shack, a tourist attraction presented as a place of curiosities and alleged wonders. The building soon becomes your temporary home, your workplace, and your first map of the town. Stan points out the road, the trees, and the distant hills with little ceremony. To him, Gravity Falls is a place where visitors can be persuaded to spend money. To Mabel, it is an enormous playground. To Dipper, it is an interruption before ordinary life resumes. The vehicle smells of old upholstery, sun-warmed metal, and the faint sweetness of spilled drinks beneath the seats. You feel the tires move from pavement to a rougher road, where small stones whisper against the underside. Branches brush lightly across the roof, making a soft succession of taps above you. Warm afternoon light breaks through the trees in shifting fragments. Pine needles cover the ground in russet layers, and dust rises gently behind the vehicle. Somewhere nearby, unseen insects keep their steady rhythm beneath the Oregon trees. The air grows cooler as the road bends into shadow. Then the mystery shack comes into view, standing among the pines with its uneven roof, crowded windows, and a creaking wooden sign suspended above the entrance. The mystery shack rises before you like a roadside promise assembled from timber, paint, and confident exaggeration. You enter beneath the sign and find rooms filled with curiosities, strange objects, handmade displays, and alleged wonders arranged for visitors. Stan moves through the building as though every dusty corner belongs to him personally. Dipper carries his bag past glass cases and painted notices, examining the exhibits with a suspicion Mabel does not share. You see a stuffed creature, a collection of unusual objects, and signs offering explanations that sound persuasive until you consider them carefully. The shack is both a home and a performance. Behind its walls are sleeping quarters, storage rooms, work areas, and the narrow passageways of a busy attraction. It offers the twins shelter, employment, and their first imperfect map of Gravity Falls. Sunlight lies across the wooden floor in long golden strips, revealing dust that drifts slowly through the still interior. The timber beneath you feels dry and slightly rough, polished in places by years of footsteps. The walls carry the warm scent of resin and old varnish. A fan turns somewhere overhead, moving the air without fully cooling it. Outside, insects hum beneath the Oregon trees, and the sound filters through the open doorway in a soft, continuous current. The sign above the entrance gives another slow creak whenever the breeze reaches it. You hear the faint clink of glass, the settling groan of the building, and the distant movement of traffic along the road. Nothing rushes. Even the dust seems to float at an unhurried pace. Stan assigns practical jobs among the roadside curiosities, placing the twins wherever the mystery shack needs another pair of hands. You watch Dipper receive tasks designed to occupy him rather than interest him. He sorts objects, cleans displays, and moves through the attraction with the resigned attention of someone counting down the days. Mabel accepts each assignment with immediate energy, turning routine work into a game before Stan has finished explaining it. He gives names to objects, invents stories for visitors, and finds amusement in the smallest corners of the building. Stan remains focused on business, money, and the steady movement of tourists through his doors. Around him, you meet the central figures of the summer: Dipper Pines, Mabel Pines, and Stan Pines, each carrying a different idea of what Gravity Falls might become. A thin layer of dust settles over the display shelves, softening the edges of wooden boxes and painted labels. You pass beneath the creaking sign again, feeling the warm air gather near the doorway. Pine resin clings to the breeze, mixed with dust and the dry sweetness of sun-heated timber. Outside, insects continue humming beneath the trees. The sound rises and fades as clouds pass across the afternoon light. A visitor's footsteps cross the porch and disappear inside. Somewhere in the shack, a loose hinge complains, followed by the gentle scrape of a drawer. The building feels busy at its edges and quiet at its center. You stand between those two sensations, surrounded by things meant to be examined, questioned, and perhaps believed. The story surrounding you belongs to Gravity Falls, an American animated mystery comedy series created by Alex Hirsch. You are entering a world produced by Disney Television Animation and broadcast from 2012 to 2016, though the town itself feels older than its television history. The first episode, Tourist Trapped, serves as the series premiere and the opening episode of its first season. It first aired in 2012, reportedly on 15 June, the same date as the twins' arrival. These facts rest quietly behind the scene while you remain beside the mystery shack in the Oregon sunlight. They give the first afternoon a precise place in time without disturbing its stillness. The porch boards hold the heat of the day, and the grain beneath your hand feels raised where years of weather have dried the wood. A breeze passes through the trees and carries the scent of pine resin across the clearing. Dust lifts from the road in small pale clouds before settling along the edges of the grass. The creaking wooden sign moves above you, its ropes tightening and loosening with each gentle shift of air. Insects hum beneath the Oregon trees, sometimes close enough to seem just beyond your shoulder. The sun touches the roof, the railing, and the uneven steps in different shades of gold. Behind you, the interior remains dimmer, full of glass, timber, and old objects. Ahead, the forest waits without appearing to wait. Dipper begins to look beyond the tourist displays, searching for something more substantial than Stan's painted wonders and collected oddities. You follow him through the rooms while Mabel remains near the center of the activity, already making the unfamiliar place her own. Dipper notices details that visitors overlook, marks on old objects, gaps in explanations, and the strange confidence with which Stan presents every alleged marvel. His boredom has begun to change into attention. The summer still seems inconvenient, but the town no longer seems entirely empty of interest. Mabel's enthusiasm fills the shack with movement, while Dipper's curiosity draws him towards its quieter margins. Stan continues his work nearby, surrounded by merchandise and stories, unaware that the first real mystery is already taking shape outside his displays. Beyond the windows, the afternoon light becomes softer, turning the dust in the air into faint, suspended gold. You hear the creak of the wooden sign above the entrance, followed by the low murmur of leaves moving together. The trees give off a green, resinous fragrance, deeper now where the shade has gathered beneath them. Warm timber surrounds you on every side, holding the day's heat in walls and floorboards. The road beyond the porch is quieter than before. A distant vehicle passes, then leaves only insects and branches behind. The Oregon air rests cool against your skin whenever you step near the doorway. Inside and outside meet there, joined by the scent of dust and pine. Dipper wanders away from the tourist displays and follows a path leading into the surrounding woods beyond the mystery shack. You move with him beneath the trees, leaving behind the painted signs, glass cases, and cheerful claims of the attraction. The path narrows quickly, its edges softened by ferns, fallen needles, and low branches. Dipper's attention fixes on the forest, as though the trees might offer an answer the shack refuses to provide. He notices the depth of the woods, the unusual quiet, and signs of movement where no visitor has passed. The town lies nearby, yet its buildings disappear behind the trunks after only a short distance. Gravity Falls becomes less a settlement and more a clearing surrounded by secrets. You continue quietly, following the path into shade. The temperature falls beneath the branches, and the warmth of the road gives way to cool earth, damp bark, and the faint sweetness of moss. Pine resin gathers in amber beads along the trunks, shining where narrow shafts of sunlight reach it. Dust from the road has not traveled far into the woods, leaving the ground darker and softer beneath your steps. Insects hum at varying distances, sometimes hidden among the ferns, and sometimes rising sharply from the undergrowth. You hear a twig break, though the forest does not reveal what caused it. Leaves brush against your sleeves. A breeze moves high overhead, while the lower air remains still. The trees stand close together, their shadows overlapping, until the path seems to lead into one long, quiet room. Dipper's first expectation of a dull summer begins to loosen as the forest gives him details that cannot be explained by tourist entertainment. You find signs that something unusual may be present, though no single discovery gives the matter a complete shape. His attention moves carefully from one mark to the next. The forest seems to offer evidence in fragments, withholding the comfort of an immediate answer. Behind you, Mabel's voice carries faintly from the direction of the shack, bright and animated among the trees. Her enthusiasm reaches even here, where the light is green and the ground is cool. Dipper stands between two kinds of summer, Mabel's cheerful invention and the forest's patient concealment. Stan's attraction remains nearby, but the woods have begun to suggest another gravity falls. A thin beam of sunlight rests on a fallen log, warming its cracked surface, while the surrounding soil remains cool. You feel the rough bark beneath your palm, split by weather and softened by dampness. Small needles lie across the log in uneven layers. The air smells of resin, moss, dust, and old timber carried from the shack. A fly moves lazily through the light before disappearing into shadow. Beneath the trees, the insects continue their humming, steady enough to resemble distant machinery. The sound from the town has faded almost completely. You hear only leaves, branches, and the measured rhythm of your steps. The woods do not demand attention, they simply keep it. At the mystery shack, Mabel approaches the town with such immediate enthusiasm that every ordinary feature becomes part of her private festival. You return with her to the porch, where she has begun to treat the attraction as a stage, a clubhouse, and a source of endless possibility. She examines costumes, rearranges small objects, and speaks to strangers with an easy confidence. The unfamiliar town does not intimidate her because she meets it by adding color and play. You see her turn employment into entertainment, and you see Stan tolerate the transformation because visitors remain amused. Dipper watches from nearby, still divided between embarrassment and affection. The twins have arrived together, yet they experience gravity, falls through different kinds of attention. Mabel looks outward and welcomes everything. Dipper looks inward and searches for what has been hidden. The porch rail is warm beneath your fingers, and the timber gives a faint, dry squeak when the afternoon wind presses against it. Dust gathers in the corners where the boards meet, while sunlight brightens the worn edges of the steps. The wooden sign above the shack creaks at irregular intervals, never quite repeating the same note. Pine resin scents the air, with a darker trace of bark and shaded earth beneath it. Insects hum beneath the Oregon trees, their sound softened by distance and foliage. From inside, glass touches glass, and a drawer slides closed. From the road, a truck passes slowly, its sound fading between the trunks. The place feels settled now. The first strangeness remains just beyond the ordinary. You begin to understand the mystery shack as more than a building because it gives the twins their roles, their shelter, and their first view of the town. You stand among curiosities that Stan has gathered, arranged, and presented as wonders for paying visitors. Dipper works reluctantly, Mabel works joyfully, and Stan keeps the business moving with practiced certainty. The shack becomes their temporary home and workplace at the same time, leaving no clear boundary between family life and public performance. Through its windows, you see the road that brings tourists into Gravity Falls. Through its back door, you see the woods that conceal whatever the road does not reveal. The building is a map drawn in rooms and corridors. It points towards money, family, forest, and mystery. The interior grows dimmer as the sun lowers, though the timber still releases the warmth it gathered during the long afternoon. A faint smell of dust rises whenever feet cross the floor. The shelves cast narrow shadows over painted signs and glass cases. Outside, insects continue beneath the trees. their humming now woven with the first coolness of evening. The creaking sign moves above the porch, and its shadow shifts across the doorway. You feel the air change near the threshold, warm inside and cool beyond it. Pine resin remains in the breeze. The road holds a little dust. The forest darkens by degrees, never suddenly. The characters who will shape this summer have all entered your view. Dipper and Mabel Pines, their great uncle Stan Pines, and the hidden world around them. You know Dipper through his careful attention and his fear that the holiday will pass without meaning. You know Mabel through her immediate delight, which turns unfamiliar rooms and streets into places of play. You know Stan through the mystery shack, his tourist attraction of curiosities and alleged wonders, where business and family occupy the same wooden walls. Dipper is voiced by Jason Ritter, Mabel by Kristen Schaal, and Stan by Alex Hirsch. Their voices belong to the series, but within the scene they become part of the town's atmosphere, cautious, bright, and gruff. You remain near the doorway as their summer begins to gather around the ordinary. Evening coolness settles over the porch, smoothing the hard brightness from the road and leaving the trees in layered blue-green shadow. You hear insects beneath the Oregon trees, quieter now, but still present. The scent of pine resin deepens as the air cools. Dust rests along the roadside, and the sun-heated timber of the shack releases its last gentle warmth. The wooden sign gives one slow creak overhead. A moth passes through the doorway and circles near the dim interior light. Beyond the clearing, branches touch one another in the darkening breeze. Nothing appears to move along the forest path. Still, the silence seems occupied, as though the woods are holding their breath without effort. Tourist Trapped begins as an arrival, but its ordinary surface soon becomes the first boundary between what Gravity Falls shows and what it keeps concealed. You stand with Dipper near the edge of the woods, looking back towards the mystery shack and its crooked sign. The building offers bright displays, family rooms, practical jobs, and stories designed to entertain. Beyond it, the forest offers older marks and quieter questions. Mabel's laughter drifts from the porch, and Stan's voice answers from inside. Dipper remains still for a moment, listening to the distance between those sounds. The town has not changed visibly. The road is still a road, the shack is still a tourist attraction, and the trees are still trees. Yet the first sense has arrived that Gravity Falls is concealing something. The last light rests gently on the upper branches, leaving the forest floor cool, brown, and soft beneath you. Pine resin glows briefly where it catches the fading light. Dust has settled along the path. The scent of sun-heated timber lingers near the shack, mingling with moss and evening air. Insects hum beneath the Oregon trees, their small voices spreading through the shadows. The wooden sign creaks once above the porch. Then it becomes still. The road grows quiet. The rooms inside the mystery shack soften into darkness. You remain there for a little while, between the warm building and the cool woods, while Gravity Falls gathers the night around its hidden places. Morning settles over the mystery shack with pale warmth, and you stand beneath the porch as the first customers approach along the dusty path. The building presents itself as a tourist attraction, with crooked signs, painted boards, and promises carefully designed to survive disbelief. Inside, Stan prepares the wooden till, arranges souvenirs, and checks the locks with the concentration of a shopkeeper guarding an inheritance. The shack is the Pines family's base during the summer, and every room carries some trace of their temporary life. Dipper and Mabel sleep upstairs, while the work below begins before the forest has fully released the night. Around you, the old carpet bears the marks of hurried footsteps, and the air holds the dry scent of varnish warmed by the rising sun. Fans turn slowly above the displays, moving the interior heat from one corner to another. Somewhere near the counter, coins touch wood with a small, deliberate clink. Stan presents the shack as a place where local legends become merchandise, and each exhibit is arranged to suggest more certainty than it possesses. A glass case contains a creature that may be a malformed animal, a clever sculpture, or something deliberately kept out of sight. A framed notice offers an improbable account of a forest event, printed in letters faded beneath years of dust. You stand close to the displays while Stan gives his public explanations, and Dipper listens with an expression that does not accept them. The claims are cheerful, simple, and profitable, yet Dipper keeps finding details that do not fit within the stories. Paranormal investigation sits beside tourist trap commerce, allowing supernatural material to share space with ordinary retail work. That contrast becomes the quiet machinery of the early premise. Coins pass from hand to hand, customers laugh at the oddities, and hidden knowledge remains just beyond the polished glass. Sunlight enters through the front windows in long, uneven strips, revealing dust drifting above the faded carpet. You can feel the floorboards answering each step with soft movement beneath your shoes. The glass cases reflect pieces of the room rather than showing everything clearly, so that a face, a taxidermied figure, and a painted forest overlap for a moment. Varnish rises from the wooden railings, mingled with the faint odor of old paper and warm fabric. A fan turns in the ceiling, its blades passing through the light at a steady pace. Near the till, coins gather in shallow circles before Stan sweeps them into a drawer. Outside, the forest stands beyond the windows in dark layers of fir and cedar, with narrow gaps where the road disappears. The warm interior feels practical and enclosed, while the trees retain a patience that does not belong to the shop. In that difference, the shack seems to rest between two kinds of reality. Suze Ramirez works at the Mystery Shack, giving the building a gentler rhythm beneath Stan's constant attention to money. You find him repairing a loose panel, carrying boxes, or explaining an exhibit with more kindness than accuracy. Suze knows the corridors, storage rooms, wiring, and places where the carpet has begun to separate from the floor. Wendy Corduroy also works at the shack, bringing a relaxed stillness to the counter and back rooms. Her work sits among sweeping, shelving, ticket handling, and the quiet duties that keep the attraction open. Together, Suze and Wendy make the building feel less like a collection of exhibits and more like a workplace shared by people with their own local histories. Stan is Dipper and Mabel's great uncle, but the shack becomes a wider household during the summer. The twins' summer employment brings them into contact with residents who arrive for souvenirs, repairs, rumors, and ordinary conversation. The back room is cooler than the public spaces, and you stand beside stacked cartons while the sound of the front shop reaches you through the wall. Cardboard gives off a dry, papery smell, while dust rests along the edges of folded posters and unused display parts. Wendy's jacket hangs from a nail, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke and clean fabric. Suze moves somewhere nearby, and the wooden boards answer his weight with patient creaks. Through a half-open door, you can see the red glow of a vending machine reflected in a dark pane of glass. The fans cannot reach this corner, so the air remains still, holding the warmth of morning inside it. From the shop comes a distant burst of laughter, followed by the clatter of a box moving across the floor. Beyond the walls, insects stir in the grass, and the forest gathers its own low conversation around the building. Mabel fills the mystery shack with color, noise, and improvised celebrations that give even an ordinary workday the shape of a small festival. You watch her make friends with visitors, residents, and anyone willing to pause near a display. A paper decoration appears above the counter, then another, until the walls carry ribbons, drawings, and bright pieces of found material. Her cheerful arrangements soften the dust and faded paint without removing them. Dipper works nearby, yet his attention is repeatedly pulled towards the windows and the tree line beyond them. He notices that the displays do not explain everything he sees outside the building. A shape crosses between trunks, a light appears where no road should be, or a sound reaches the porch after everyone has entered the shack. Stan keeps his attention on customers, prices, receipts, and the protection of the business. Dipper begins looking for private explanation of gravity falls, while Mabel turns the public rooms into a place where almost anyone can feel at home. Afternoon light rests across the front room with softer brightness, and the colored decorations cast small shadows upon the old carpet. You hear hurried footsteps rise and fade, leaving behind a faint vibration in the floorboards. Glass cases hold warm reflections, while the varnished shelves shine where many hands have touched them. The smell of timber lingers beneath the sharper sense of dust and printed paper. A fan turns slowly over the entrance, pushing air across your face before the warmth settles again. From outside comes the dry rustle of leaves, although the nearest branches remain almost still. The forest beyond the windows appears in fragments between posters and shelves, broken into dark trunks and patches of green. Near the counter, coins touch the wooden till at measured intervals. Every sound belongs to an ordinary shop, yet the spaces between those sounds seem to leave room for something less easily named. The shack's exhibits are associated with local legends and improbable claims, and Stan understands that mystery sells more easily when it carries a price tag. You move from one display to the next while he describes unusual footprints, impossible animals, and stories that have traveled through gravity falls for generations. His explanations are confident enough for visitors seeking amusement, but Dipper treats them as evidence of concealment. The more Stan insists that a display is harmless, the more carefully Dipper studies its hinges, labels, and surrounding dust. Suspicion becomes part of his daily work, woven between cleaning duties and counting receipts. Mabel sees the same exhibits as opportunities for costumes, games, and new friendships. Suze accepts their strangeness with practical good humor, while Wendy moves through the rooms as if the unusual belongs naturally beside the mundane. The Mystery Shack allows these attitudes to exist together, and the building grows more complicated with every passing hour. Warm air lies close to the walls, carrying the dry smell of old carpet and the sweet trace of candy opened near the till. You can sense the faint roughness of the wooden rail beneath your fingertips, where the varnish has worn away. A pane of glass trembles when the front door closes, and the reflected shapes inside the case shift for an instant. Dust gathers in the corners beneath a display labeled with a claim too unlikely to repeat aloud. Somewhere above you, a fan clicks once during its slow turning. Outside, the forest moves in broad layers, with needles trembling high above and ferns bending close to the ground. The road beyond the porch remains narrow, and no distant traffic interrupts the small sounds of the attraction. A bird calls from the trees, then leaves the air quiet again. The shack continues its cheerful business, though the woods seem to hold their own account of the day. The series uses the shack as a recurring meeting place for investigations, because its public rooms offer privacy beneath the appearance of constant activity. You find Dipper studying notes near the counter, while Mabel arranges objects into a display with no official name. Stan passes behind them with an armful of supplies, protecting the shack through vigilance, suspicion, and carefully guarded information. Suze appears whenever a hinge sticks, a machine fails, or an unexplained passage requires someone willing to crawl beneath the floor. Wendy knows which doors remain open after closing time and which paths lead most quickly into the surrounding forest. The building gathers the town around its counter, allowing residents to bring rumors that become clues before anyone has decided to investigate them. Commerce gives the conversations a harmless surface. Hidden knowledge moves underneath, carried through glances, folded papers, locked cabinets, and the sudden attention of someone who recognizes an old name. The evening begins in the windows before it reaches the floor, and you watch the sunlight withdraw from the glass cases one reflection at a time. The fans continue their slow rotation, though the warm interior air has begun to cool near the doors. Faded paint appears gentler beneath the dimness, and the varnished shelves take on the color of honeyed wood. A final group of visitors crosses the carpet, leaving soft impressions that soon blend with older tracks. Coins rest in the wooden till with a heavier sound than they made in the morning. Outside, the forest darkens from green to blue, and the narrow road loses its clear edge. Mabel's decorations stir whenever the door opens, raising small shadows against the wall. The smell of timber remains in the room, now joined by the cooler scent of moss entering from the porch. You stand between the display cases and the windows, with the ordinary shop behind you and the forest waiting beyond the glass. Gravity Falls is fictional rather than a documented Oregon town, yet the series gives it the texture of a place remembered from roads, forests, and distant communities. You move through the imagined town as if its small streets continue beyond every frame, leading towards homes, diners, workshops, and stretches of quiet woodland. The town is portrayed as small and isolated from ordinary urban life, allowing rumors to remain local for a long time. A strange event can pass from neighbor to neighbor before anyone outside the valley hears of it. The Mystery Shack stands within that isolation, offering visitors a controlled version of the town's unusual character. Stan sells mystery as entertainment, while Dipper searches for the older and less comfortable truth beneath it. Around them, residents bring their habits, grievances, kindnesses, and secrets through the front door. The twins meet these people through work, and the attraction becomes a threshold between family life and the wider town. Night presses gently against the windows, leaving the interior lit by yellow lamps and the occasional red glow from a machine. You hear the floor creak when someone crosses the room, followed by the soft settling of the old carpet. Glass cases become dark mirrors, giving back the outlines of shelves and hanging decorations. The varnish on the counter feels cool now, and the wooden till rests closed beneath Stan's hand. A fan stirs the air above you, moving slowly enough for each turn to seem separate from the next. Outside, branches overlap against the sky, and the forest has become a single deep shape around the building. Moss holds the day's dampness along the path, while sun-heated timber releases its last trace of warmth. From far away comes a faint sound that may be an animal, a falling branch, or something hidden among the trees. The road remains quiet, and the Mystery Shack keeps its light burning like a small island. The first season contains 20 episodes, beginning in 2012 and concluding in 2013, though the events inside the shack seem to unfold within one long summer. You carry that season through mornings of work, afternoons of investigation, and evenings when the town's ordinary surfaces begin to loosen. The final episode of the first season aired on 2 August 2013, giving the early story a fixed point beyond the shifting hours of the forest. The complete television series contains 2 seasons and 40 regular episodes, but the Mystery Shack remains a stable center across that larger design. Its counter, porch, storage rooms, and displays return as familiar places whenever the town's mysteries gather momentum. Dipper's private search grows from his suspicion of Stan's explanations, while Mabel's friendships widen the family's connection to local residents. The series places a carefully dated television history beside an imagined Oregon town, allowing the invented setting to feel strangely durable. A thin line of moonlight reaches beneath the front curtains, touching the carpet where customers stood earlier in the day. You notice small fibers lifted by footsteps, along with pale grains of dust resting beside the baseboards. The glass cases hold their shapes in darkness, and a faint reflection of the forest appears over the labels. Old paint gives off a dry mineral scent, while the wood retains the deeper fragrance of varnish. Air from the fan passes over your hands, neither cool nor warm, and then disappears into the shadows above. Somewhere in the building, a pipe contracts with a muted tick. Beyond the walls, the trees rise in layers, their branches joining into a canopy that hides the wider sky. The forest seems close enough to touch, although the windows remain firmly shut. You can hear night insects beyond the porch, moving in scattered patterns through grass and moss. The shack is quiet, but its quietness does not feel empty. Stan's attention remains fixed on money, customers, and the protection of the shack, because the attraction is both his livelihood and his guarded domain. You see him count receipts beneath a lamp, place keys into separate pockets, and inspect the locks before the night becomes complete. His public explanations make the exhibit seem simple, yet his private movements suggest that the building contains more than he is willing to admit. Dipper notices every interruption, hurried answer, and door Stan closes without explanation. Suspicion does not arrive as a dramatic decision. It grows through small observations gathered across repeated days. Mabel accepts Stan's authority more easily, though her affection for the family does not prevent her from wandering into unusual situations. Suze keeps the machinery alive, Wendy keeps the work bearable, and the twins occupy the border between employment and discovery. The contrast between commerce and hidden knowledge drives the early premise, with receipts and mysteries sharing the same counter. Cool air has entered through the seams around the door, carrying the scent of wet earth from the path outside. You feel the temperature change along your ankles, while the upper room remains softened by the lingering warmth of the day. The old carpet muffles movement, yet a loose board near the counter gives a quiet complaint beneath a passing step. Shadows settle beneath the glass cases, where painted labels no longer explain the objects they describe. Faded colors retreat into brown, gray, and deep green. The fan continues above, turning the stale air with calm, mechanical patience. Outside, leaves brush against one another in the upper branches, making a sound like cloth drawn slowly across wood. A darker line marks the forest edge, though the boundary between clearing and trees is difficult to hold in moonlight. The wooden sign above the porch moves once, then rests. You remain inside the circle of lamplight, while the woods keep their distance. Dipper begins looking for a private explanation of the town, and his search returns first to the mystery shack. You find him examining display labels, old newspapers, and the spaces behind pictures that Stan has allowed to hang for years. He's not satisfied with the stories offered to tourists, because each explanation leaves behind an unexamined detail. A local legend may be presented as a joke, yet a mark on the wall suggests that someone once took it seriously. An improbable claim may attract customers, while surrounding records reveal a pattern too orderly to dismiss. Dipper's investigation develops within the routine of the shop, moving quietly between sweeping, serving, and watching. Mabel's improvised celebrations interrupt the seriousness without destroying it, bringing color into rooms where old secrets might otherwise become too heavy. The twins work together unevenly, but the shack keeps drawing them towards the same unanswered margin. Before dawn, the building holds the coolness of night, and you stand near the front windows while the forest begins to separate into visible trunks. The glass feels cold beneath your fingertips. Moisture has gathered along the lower frame, carrying a faint scent of moss and rain-darkened soil. The carpet remains quiet under your feet, its worn surface softened by years of use. A fan waits overhead, motionless until the power comes on. From the porch comes a single creak as the wooden boards respond to changing temperature. Beyond the sign, the path lies gray beneath the trees, and small beads of water shine along the grass. The forest seems to breathe through tiny movements, with leaves shifting before the morning wind fully arrives. Somewhere behind the shack, a bird begins its first call. The darkness thins without vanishing, and the room prepares to become a shop again. A morning of selling souvenirs and demonstrating oddities gives the shack its cheerful rhythm, even when the people inside carry questions that cannot be answered at the counter. You watch Stan arrange postcards, novelty objects, and carefully labeled curiosities beneath the windows. Suze tests a display mechanism that produces a harmless rattle, while Wendy leans against the wall and observes the arriving visitors. Mabel greets strangers as if they have entered a celebration already in progress, and new friendships form beside the shelves. Dipper moves through the same rooms with a notebook hidden near his work materials. Each task brings him close to another clue, though the ordinary demands of the shop keep interrupting his search. Supernatural investigation emerges from retail labor without separating the mysterious world from the practical one. A customer asks about a legendary creature, Stan names a price, and Dipper studies the question beneath the question. The first visitors bring cool air into the entrance, followed by the smell of dust raised from the path. You hear shoes crossing the old carpet in different rhythms, some careful and some hurried. Coins land in the wooden till, producing a bright clink that travels through the room. Glass cases catch the morning light and return it in thin, wavering reflections. The faded paint along the walls shows scratches, fingerprints, and patches where older colors remain visible. Varnish gives the shelves a warm, resinous scent, strongest near the counter where sunlight has gathered. A fan turns overhead, slowly dispersing the heat created by bodies, lamps, and closed windows. Outside, the forest stands in clear green brightness, with dark shadows beneath the branches. The road beyond the porch remains empty between arrivals. Even at its busiest, the shack seems surrounded by a silence belonging to the trees. Stan is Dipper and Mabel's grey tuncle, and his position gives the mystery shack the feeling of both workplace and family territory. You see him correct a display, settle a dispute, and place himself between the building and anyone who appears too curious. His concern with money is obvious, but the protection of the shack carries another layer that Dipper cannot yet describe. Stan's public explanations are repeatedly treated with suspicion by Dipper, whose questions return whenever the adults have finished speaking. Mabel notices the affection beneath the arguments and finds ways to keep the household from becoming solemn. Suze offers assistance without demanding complete understanding, while Wendy makes the daily routine feel less rigid. The twins' employment brings them into contact with local residents, and those encounters gradually turn the attraction into a map of the town. Every visitor adds a voice, habit, or fragment of memory to the rooms. By midday, heat gathers beneath the roof, and you feel the warm interior air resting against your face as the fan moves above. The carpet has become softer beneath repeated footsteps, and tiny flecks of dirt collect near the entrance. Sunlight touches the glass cases, making their edges bright while their contents remain partly concealed by reflection. Faded paint absorbs the brightness unevenly, leaving certain letters clearer than others. The scent of varnish rises from the counter whenever a hand slides across its surface. Coins click together inside the wooden till, each sound brief and separate. Outside, the forest is alive with insects, wing beats, and small movements beneath the ferns. The air beyond the windows appears brighter than the air inside, though the trees offer no explanation for lights that sometimes pass between them. You stand within the cheerful noise of business, listening for the quieter pattern beneath it. The forest beyond the building seems less like scenery than an unanswered margin, and Dipper's attention keeps returning to its uneven edge. You follow his gaze through the windows, past posters and shelves, towards paths that disappear beneath branches. The surrounding forest is central to the story's visual setting, enclosing the shack and separating Gravity Falls from ordinary urban life. Its trees provide shade, distance, hiding places, and a sense that the town continues beyond what can be measured. Stan treats the woods as a source of customers, stories, and useful atmosphere. Dipper treats them as a record waiting to be read. Mabel enters them with curiosity and color, bringing her own way of turning uncertainty into company. Suze and Wendy know the paths through practical experience, although their familiarity does not make every place harmless. The forest remains close to the workplace, and the boundary between a day's business and an evening's investigation is never firm. A breeze reaches the porch and passes through the open door, carrying pine resin, damp leaves, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. You hear branches move above the roof, while the fan continues its slower mechanical turning indoors. The old carpet holds the warmth of the day and gives back a muted smell of dust. Sunlit glass produces small flashes whenever someone walks between the windows and displays. Along the wall, faded paint feels chalky beneath the eye, its surface interrupted by nicks from years of use. The wooden till remains open, and coins lie in shallow stacks that catch the light. Outside, the forest floor is patterned with needles, moss, and narrow trails made by animals or visitors. A distant crow calls once across the trees. The sound fades into a larger quiet, leaving the attraction surrounded by green distance and the steady warmth of afternoon. Mabel makes friends throughout the town, and you see how quickly the Mystery Shack becomes a meeting place for people who might otherwise never share the same room. She remembers names, invents small celebrations, and turns a routine shift into an occasion with paper crowns or painted signs. Her friendships reveal local residents as more than witnesses to strange events. They become neighbors with work, family stories, private fears, and familiarity with the town's odd habits. Dipper gathers information through questions, while Mabel gathers it through affection and conversation. Stan continues to watch the receipts, locks, displays, and people who linger too long near restricted doors. The shack's business proceeds around them, giving every investigation a background of ordinary responsibilities. A supernatural clue may appear beside a rack of postcards, and a local rumor may be exchanged while someone waits for change. Commerce and hidden knowledge remain joined beneath the same roof. Late sunlight lies across the floor in broad amber shapes, and you can see the edges of Mabel's decorations trembling in the moving air. The carpet feels warm where the windows have touched it, while the corners remain cool and dim. Glass cases reflect the branches outside, so that the forest appears to grow among the exhibits. Varnish releases a faint resinous smell from the shelves, softened by paper, fabric, and old dust. The fans turn slowly overhead, making a continuous sound that blends with the insects beyond the walls. Coins shift inside the wooden till whenever Stan counts them, producing a dry, metallic rhythm. A customer's footsteps fade along the porch, and the door closes with a cushioned wooden thud. Beyond the building, a path disappears into shadow beneath the trees. The day remains bright, but the forest has begun to prepare for evening. Suze works at the Mystery Shack with the practical steadiness of someone who can repair a machine without explaining why it failed. You find him beneath the counter, behind a display, or carrying objects too large for the narrow corridors. He knows the building through touch and routine, understanding which stair complains, which lamp flickers, and which cabinet refuses to open. Wendy also works at the shack, giving the afternoon a slower, more observant pace. She handles ordinary duties without surrendering her awareness of the unusual world outside. Their work allows the attraction to feel inhabited rather than staged, because the building depends upon people who clean, mend, carry, and wait. The twins learn the names of local residents through these shared tasks, and the town gradually enters their summer. The shack's open doors draw visitors, workers, family, and secrets into the same rooms. A cooler current moves beneath the front door, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere beyond the visible hills. You notice the change in the air before clouds gather over the trees. The old carpet darkens where damp shoes have crossed it, leaving irregular marks beside the brighter worn sections. Faded paint appears deeper beneath the growing shadow, and the glass cases lose their sharp reflections. The varnished counter remains warm beneath your palm, holding the day's heat in its polished surface. Above, the fan turns with a faint mechanical hum, stirring papers and ribbons. Outside, leaves flash pale beneath a moving cloud, then return to green. The forest gathers the distant weather without urgency, its branches shifting in wide, patient layers. From the roof comes a soft tap, followed by another. Rain has begun somewhere above the shack. Dipper notices that the displays do not explain everything he sees beyond the windows, and his private explanation of gravity falls becomes more deliberate with each shift. You stand beside him while he studies a dark opening between trees, comparing it with a sketch hidden among his work papers. Stan gives an ordinary answer when asked, but it leaves the same uneasy space behind it. The exhibits may be associated with local legends and improbable claims, yet their labels reveal only the surface of a wider pattern. The shack presents mystery as entertainment, while the forest preserves it without needing an audience. Dipper searches for names, dates, and places that might connect the stories. Mabel helps when the search becomes lonely, bringing color and companionship into the investigation. Stan guards the building and its business, aware that the truth beneath the attraction could threaten both. The early story grows from this tension between selling wonder and protecting what wonder conceals. Rain moves across the roof in a soft, changing texture, louder above the entrance and quieter over the back rooms. You smell wet timber through the cracks around the porch, mingled with the warm dust of the interior. Drops gather on the windows, breaking the forest into blurred greens and dark vertical lines. The carpet absorbs movement, so that footsteps seem to arrive from farther away than they are. A fan continues its slow turning, pushing moist air through the room. The glass cases hold pale streaks of reflected light, while their contents recede into shadow. Near the till, coins remain dry beneath the counter lamp, and the wooden drawer waits half open. Rainwater runs along the path outside, joining moss and leaves in narrow, shining channels. The forest seems closer through the wet glass, though its details have become less certain. The first season began in 2012 and concluded in 2013, carrying the mystery shack through ordinary days that gradually become difficult to separate from the supernatural. You see the same counter, displays, and rooms return as the town reveals another hidden layer. The first season's final episode aired on 2 August 2013, giving the summer's uncertainty a place within a larger passage of time. The complete series contains 2 seasons, with 40 regular episodes forming the full account of Gravity Falls and the Pines family stay. Yet the shack remains intimate even when the story expands beyond its walls. Its business continues to offer souvenirs, explanations, and distractions, while its rooms provide a practical base for investigation. Dipper's suspicion of Stan grows beside his dependence on the building. Mabel's friendships keep the town warm and immediate. Sue's and Wendy preserve the daily rhythm that allows the extraordinary to feel quietly possible. The storm passes towards the hills, leaving the air washed and cool around the building. You hear water falling from the roof in a steady line, striking the ground beside the porch. Damp carpet gives off the smell of earth and old fibers, while the varnished shelves carry a faint warmth from the lamps. The glass cases are clearer now, holding reflections of wet branches and moving clouds. A fan turns above the room, drying the air by degrees. Coins in the till make a soft sound when Stan closes the drawer. Outside, the forest floor shines beneath the last grey light, and drops tremble on the needles of the lower branches. The wooden sign has darkened with rain, its lettering still visible beneath the wet surface. Small streams cross the path and disappear into moss. You remain within the sheltered building, listening as the storm becomes part of the ordinary night. Stan keeps his attention on money, customers, and the protection of the shack, but the building's safety is never only a matter of locked doors. You see him pause near a cabinet, listening to a sound that Dipper cannot hear. He checks the windows, studies the forest, and returns to the counter without offering an explanation. His public stories remain polished and convenient, yet Dipper continues to treat them with suspicion. Every omission becomes another mark in the notebook. Every locked room suggests that the tourist attraction was built around something older than its advertisements. The shack's cheerful business provides Stan with cover, income, and a reason to control the flow of strangers. It also places the twins close to the very knowledge he wishes to keep concealed. The family works beneath signs meant for visitors, while the forest and town continue to supply questions. Quiet business and hidden danger occupy the same rooms. The lamps cast low pools of amber across the floor, and you feel the remaining warmth of the day beneath the cooler night air. Water drops fall from the porch roof at regular intervals, each one marking the darkness outside. Old carpet fibers rise slightly where dampness has entered, and the room carries the smell of rain-soaked wood. Faded paint glows near the lamps, then disappears towards the corners. Glass cases shine along their edges, leaving the objects inside difficult to distinguish. The fans turn slowly, their quiet hum woven into the patter beyond the walls. A wooden shelf gives a small creak as the building settles. Through the window, the forest appears as layered darkness, with occasional movement among the branches. The road has become a narrow, wet line, reflecting almost no light. Inside the shack, the air remains sheltered, warm, and patient. The mystery shack allows supernatural material to sit beside ordinary retail work, giving the story its particular calm tension. You see a strange object displayed beside postcards, a local legend printed beside a price list, and an investigation beginning while someone restocks the shelves. Stan's attraction depends upon the appearance of harmless entertainment, but Dipper senses that the performance protects a deeper history. The town's isolation keeps that history close, preventing ordinary urban life from washing away its irregularities. Gravity Falls remains fictional, yet its forests, roads, families, and small businesses are presented with the steadiness of remembered places. The series combines the tourist trap setting with paranormal investigation, allowing mystery to grow from familiar labor. Mabel brings people together through friendship and celebration. Suze and Wendy keep the building functioning. Stan guards its secrets. Dipper looks beyond the windows, towards the forest that seems less like scenery than an unanswered margin. The night air rests against the glass, and you can feel its coolness even within the closed room. The wooden till is shut, though the smell of coins remains near the counter. Wet timber and varnish mingle with the faint sweetness of paper decorations left from Mabel's latest celebration. The old carpet has begun to dry, returning to its familiar dusty texture beneath your feet. Fans turn above the displays, moving the air in slow circles. Rainwater threads through the moss beside the path, making tiny sounds that vanish beneath the larger silence. The forest holds drops on its leaves and branches, each surface reflecting a little of the moon. Somewhere beyond the trees, an unseen animal moves through undergrowth, then stops. The sign above the porch hangs motionless now. The mystery shack stands between warm rooms and dark woods, its painted promises resting quietly until morning. Dipper's search remains private, but the explanation he seeks is already shaping the way he sees the town. You follow him through the dim corridor as he passes locked doors, old photographs, and shelves carrying objects that no visitor has been invited to examine. His questions return to the same names, dates, and places hidden beneath Stan's explanations. Gravity Falls is small enough for stories to circulate, isolated enough for them to remain undisturbed. and surrounded by forest deep enough to preserve an unanswered margin. The mystery shack stands at the center of that arrangement, part shop, part family home, and part meeting place for investigations. The first season's 20 episodes establish the rhythm through which business and mystery share the summer. The series ultimately reaches 40 regular episodes across 2 seasons, but the early days remain close to the wooden till, glass cases, and slow fans. You remain there with Dipper while the forest keeps its silence. The room grows darker as the lamps are lowered, and you notice the last warm reflections withdrawing from the glass cases. The carpet settles beneath the quiet building, holding the memory of hurried footsteps and damp shoes. A trace of varnish remains in the air, joined by the cool scent of moss outside. Fans continue their slow turning until the room seems to breathe with them. The wooden counter feels smooth beneath your hand, its surface marked by years of customers and work. Beyond the windows, the forest has become a patient arrangement of shadows, needles, and faint silver leaves. The road disappears entirely beyond the porch. No city lights reach the shack, and no distant traffic disturbs the insects beneath the Oregon trees. The wooden sign creaks once above the entrance, then becomes still. Between the warm building and the cool woods, the quiet business of the mystery shack continues into night. By morning, the forest near Gravity Falls has taken on a softer color. Mist rests between the trunks, and the first pale light gathers on the upper branches, while the ground remains dim beneath them. You are standing among firs and cedar, where needles brush against your jacket sleeve and damp earth presses gently beneath your shoes. Dipper moves ahead through the trees, carrying the tired restlessness of a summer that has not yet offered him anything lasting. The town lies behind you, with its crooked roads, wooden buildings, and strange silences, while the forest opens and closes around the narrow path. There is no clear destination, only the feeling that something may be waiting beyond the familiar places. Small stones shift beneath your feet, and roots rise like dark ropes through the soil. The air smells of resin, rain, and distant leaves. Dipper has entered the trees looking for something that might make the summer meaningful. The search begins without a map or a promise, shaped only by his unwillingness to remain passive inside the mystery shack. Around you, the forest conceals its details beneath ferns and fallen branches, making every hollow seem deeper than it is. Dipper studies the ground, parts low bushes, and pauses whenever an unusual mark appears in the mud. His attention has sharpened since arriving in Gravity Falls, although he cannot yet explain what he expects to find. The town has already shown him moments that resist ordinary answers, but they have passed too quickly to form a pattern. Somewhere among the trees, a hidden object waits beneath bark and shadow. The forest does not announce its presence. It simply allows Dipper to come closer. A cool breeze slips between the trunks and carries the faint ticking of insects. The needles above you tremble in separate layers, so that the sound resembles a distant brush moving across cloth. Moisture gathers on the edges of broad leaves and drops slowly onto the soil. Along the roots, tiny grains of sand cling to dark water, while a thin thread of moss follows the curve of a stone. Your sleeve catches against a twig, then releases with a quiet scrape. The forest floor gives slightly beneath each step, softened by years of fallen needles and decomposing wood. Somewhere farther away, a bird calls once, waits, and remains silent. The earth already carries a patient age. Light filters down in narrow columns, touching one patch of ground before withdrawing behind the clouds. Near a slope crowded with roots, Dipper notices that one tree is different from the others. Its bark has the dull, regular surface of painted metal, and its trunk gives a faint, hollow sound when his knuckles touch it. The metal tree stands among living trees as though it has always belonged there, concealed by branches and the green darkness of the forest. A narrow opening appears beneath its roots, covered by a loose plate that matches the surrounding soil. Dipper kneels and pulls the plate aside. You can feel the cold rising from the hollow, a clean metallic chill contrasting with the damp warmth of the earth. Inside, something rectangular rests behind a cluster of stones. It seems too carefully placed to have been forgotten. Dipper reaches into the hidden space and draws out a heavy book. The book is cool against your hands when Dipper brings it into the open. Damp soil has collected along its edges, and small fragments of bark cling to the spine. Its cover is burgundy, darkened by age and marked with scratches, dents, and pale areas where the surface has worn away. A gold six-fingered hand spreads across the center, its shape both emblematic and unsettling. The number 3 appears within the hand, set into the design as though it were part of the palm. A monocle hangs from the book by a cord, resting against the damaged cover with a faint wooden tap. The object has the weight of something carried far and hidden carefully. It does not look like a toy or a forgotten notebook. It resembles a record that survived because someone believed its contents must remain. Dipper turns the journal over and examines the binding. The burgundy leather has cracked at the corners, and the gold six-fingered hand has lost some of its shine beneath scratches and dust. The monocle cord is frayed where it joins the cover, although the glass remains clear. A dry leather creak comes from the spine as the book opens beneath his fingers. You hear it distinctly, close to the soft movement of paper fibers and the faint rubbing of grit against leather. The pages are yellowed at their edges, but the writing remains dark in places. Pencil lines cross the paper in hurried diagrams, while inked symbols occupy the margins. The faint smell of old binding rises from the open book, mixed with damp earth and crushed needles. The journal rests heavily in the quiet, as though the forest has been waiting for its return. The first pages contain drawings of creatures that do not belong in any ordinary field guide. One has too many eyes, another stretches across several lines of paper, and a third is represented only by a crooked shadow beneath a warning. Notes describe supernatural creatures and entities with a precision that makes them feel observed rather than imagined. Dipper reads slowly, tracing the writer's careful marks with one finger. Some passages identify habits, locations, and weaknesses. Others stop abruptly beside dark symbols, as though the writer had been interrupted. Warnings fill the lower margins, sometimes underlined several times. Codes appear between ordinary sentences, and small maps connect the creatures to places around Gravity Falls. The journal is not a collection of stories. It is evidence arranged by someone who spent years recording what the town preferred to hide. A faint smell of wet bark follows the breeze while the pages settle into place. The paper is rough beneath your fingertips, made of fibers that have swollen slightly in the forest air. Pencil shading gathers in the folds of illustrated wings, claws, and branches. Some lines are so light that they seem to disappear when the page turns, while darker strokes remain pressed into the paper with unusual force. The monocle lies beside the book, its cord forming a loose loop over the ground. A drop of moisture lands near a coded paragraph and spreads slowly into the fibers. The ink holds its shape. Beneath the trees, the pages make a small, papery whisper whenever Dipper moves them. The sound is intimate and dry, like leaves turning in a room where the fire has burned low. Dipper recognizes one of the drawings. The creature described in the journal is the same strange being he has just encountered in town, its features copied in exact detail beneath a heading that confirms its existence. Recognition passes through him as a quiet shock. Until this moment, the events of Gravity Falls could still be dismissed as coincidence, trickery, or the exaggerated stories of strangers. Now the journal supplies a name, a sketch, and a warning connected to something he has personally seen. Dipper reads the entry again, then compares the drawing with the memory held in his mind. The resemblance is too precise to ignore. The book gives him evidence that the town's strangeness is real. Its pages turn uncertainty into a shape that can be studied. The forest remains calm around the discovery. A branch bends beneath yesterday's rain, releasing several drops onto the broad leaves below. Mud darkens the lower edge of Dipper's shoe, and a pale thread of root shows where the soil has been disturbed. You are close enough to feel the roughness of the metal surface, colder and smoother than the living bark nearby. The book's leather smells dry despite the moisture surrounding it. A small beetle crosses the open page, moving over a penciled line before disappearing beneath the margin. The air is cool against your face, though the space beneath the branches holds a little warmth. No dramatic sound rises from the hidden tree. The journal remains where it was found, its silence deepened by ordinary leaves and insects. Mabel treats the journal as exciting proof rather than a cause for fear. When she sees the drawings and codes, her attention moves quickly from one page to another, taking pleasure in each strange entry. The warnings that trouble Dipper seem to her like invitations to examine the next mystery. She studies the gold six-fingered hand, counts the fingers, and notices the number 3 within the emblem. The burgundy cover appears to her like the door of a secret room. Dipper remains cautious, but Mabel's confidence prevents the object from becoming entirely forbidding. Between them, the journal develops 2 meanings. It is a warning about supernatural creatures, and it is also a promise that Gravity Falls contains more stories than anyone has told them. The hidden book begins to belong to their summer. The light strengthens gently through the branches, although the forest floor remains covered in brown and green shadow. Mabel's sleeve brushes against a fern, shaking beads of water onto the needles. The book lies open across a flat stone, its damaged corners casting small angular shadows. Paper fibers show along a torn edge, and a penciled creature appears to lift its head when the page curves beneath a thumb. A soft breeze carries resin from the upper branches. Near the roots, the damp earth is cool and granular, mixed with tiny fragments of stone. The cord attached to the monocle rests against the cover and shifts whenever the pages move. The old binding gives another restrained creak, followed by the delicate sound of paper returning to rest. Dipper begins to understand that the journal may be a record of the town itself. Its entries do not describe distant legends gathered from libraries. They refer to local paths, nearby buildings, caves, lakes, and particular patterns in the forest. The pages contain information about supernatural creatures and entities, but they also preserve Gravity Falls' hidden history. Each drawing seems connected to a place, and every warning suggests that earlier visitors encountered dangers beneath familiar scenery. Dipper wonders how long the author remained in the area and why the book was concealed inside a metal tree. The deliberate hiding place suggests both urgency and preparation. Someone had expected the journal to be found, though perhaps only by the right person. The object has crossed from curiosity into responsibility. The forest around the metal tree carries a different stillness from the open clearing. Sound seems to soften beneath the close arrangement of trunks, and even the distant bird call arrives muted by layers of foliage. A strip of sunlight touches the journal's burgundy cover, revealing fine cracks through its surface. The gold emblem glints briefly, then dulls as a cloud moves across the sky. The monocle glass reflects a pale fragment of branch before disappearing beneath shadow. Dust rests inside the hinge, gathering along the narrow seam between leather and paper. Your fingers feel the uneven cover, the raised outline of the six-fingered hand, and the shallow impression of the number 3. Beneath your feet, stones press through the earth in irregular shapes. The whole place seems assembled from quiet textures. The journal is associated with the mysterious author, whose identity remains concealed behind the evidence of his work. No portrait introduces him, and no simple signature explains his motives. Instead, the author appears through diagrams, warnings, coded passages, and observations written in a hand that changes as the pages grow more dangerous. Some notes are neat and measured, while others lean sharply across the paper. Certain entries contain corrections, crossed-out phrases, and additions written in the margins. The differences suggest years of study, fear, and persistence. Dipper cannot tell whether the author intended the journal as a warning, a catalogue, or part of a larger plan. The association grows stronger because the book feels personal. It carries the presence of someone who knew gravity falls intimately and understood that its secrets required protection. A narrow wind passes through the trees, moving from trunk to trunk with a low, breath-like murmur. Needles gather in shallow ridges beside exposed roots, and wet stones shine beneath a film of brown water. The book's pages lift at one corner, then fall with a muted flap. A dry leather creak follows from the spine, slow and brittle, like an old chair shifting near a fireplace. The pencil marks appear darker against the yellow paper when the clouds brighten. You can see small breaks in the graphite where the fibers interrupt the lines. The smell of old binding is faint but persistent, carrying something dusty and sweet beneath the sharper scent of cedar. A thread from the monocle cord catches on a splinter and trembles before coming free. The number 3 gives the journal its immediate identity, but it also suggests that the book belongs to something larger. Dipper finds references to other volumes, marked by different numbers and scattered through the notes. The journals form a series of 3, each connected to the author's work and to Gravity Falls' hidden history. The discovery raises a quiet question about the missing volumes. If Journal 3 is buried beneath a metal tree, Journals 1 and 2 may lie elsewhere, concealed beneath the town's ordinary surfaces. Dipper looks at the damaged cover again, seeing the 6-fingered hand as a sign of continuity. The emblem no longer seems decorative. It is a mark shared by a collection whose full meaning has not yet been uncovered. Mist retreats in thin strands from the lower ground, leaving beads of moisture along the ferns. The trees seem taller as the air clears, their trunks rising into a pale roof of needles. A root beside you has been polished smooth by rain and passing animals, while another remains rough and fibrous beneath a skin of moss. Dipper's jacket catches several dry needles, and Mabel's hand leaves a faint mark on the damp leather. The paper has a slightly warm smell when held close, though the surrounding forest remains cool. A faint tapping comes from somewhere overhead, perhaps one branch touching another in the wind. The sound repeats at uneven intervals, allowing the silence between each contact to become part of the rhythm. The journal first appears in the opening episode, Tourist Trapped, where Dipper discovers it during the early days of his summer in Gravity Falls. The episode was written by Alex Hirsch and directed by John Aoshima, with production code 618G107. Those details belong to the careful record of the story's creation. Within the story, the book arrives as an unexplained object hidden in the forest. Dipper does not receive it from an official guide or a trusted adult. He finds it because curiosity leads him away from the paths expected of him. The episode places Journal 3 at the beginning of the mystery, allowing the book to become a bridge between the ordinary holiday and the concealed world beneath the town. The morning has grown brighter, but the light remains filtered and green. Thin sunbeams settle on patches of moss, making them appear almost luminous before the branches shift again. Damp earth clings to the seams of your shoes, and cool grains of sand press between stones near the exposed roots. The metal tree holds a dull reflection of the surrounding forest, broken into vertical shapes by scratches and dents. A small spider has placed a line of silk between 2 low branches, where it trembles without breaking. The journal's burgundy leather absorbs most of the light, leaving the gold hand as its brightest feature. pages smell of dry paper, pencil dust, and old binding. Each turn produces a different whisper, depending on the thickness of the sheet. Dipper carries Journal 3 back through the forest, holding it against his chest, while Mabel walks beside him. The book is too important to leave beneath the metal tree, although he suspects that the hiding place protected it for a reason. The monocle taps lightly against the cover with each step, making a small rhythm beneath branches and shoes. Dipper reads whenever the path widens, stopping beside fallen logs to study another drawing or warning. The creature he recognized remains at the center of his thoughts, but the journal contains hundreds of other references waiting to be understood. His summer has changed from passive boredom into investigation. The days ahead are no longer empty spaces between meals and sleep. They have become possible connections within a record that began before he arrived. The path slopes downward through younger trees, where branches grow close to shoulder height. Needles brush your jacket sleeve in soft, repeated strokes, leaving a faint green scent behind. Mud gives way to pale stones, which shift gently beneath your weight. Along the ground, broken cones lie open beside dark curls of bark. Mabel's movement sends a few leaves spinning across the path, and one settles against the journal's lower corner. The leather is scarred but supple, with a shallow crease running from the emblem towards the spine. Sunlight warms the monocle glass for a moment, then fades beneath thicker branches. The air becomes still again, carrying only the small sounds of footsteps and paper. At the mystery shack, Dipper finds a quiet place to examine the book without interruption. The building's walls keep out much of the forest wind, although the smell of damp wood remains near the windows. He places Journal 3 on a table and opens it beneath the available light. The heavy book spreads slowly, and its spine gives a dry leather creak that seems louder indoors. Drawings cover some pages from edge to edge, while other sheets contain precise notes arranged beside small symbols. Warnings are written in darker ink, and codes appear where ordinary sentences seem to end too soon. Dipper begins using the journal as a guide to unexplained events, comparing its descriptions with anything unusual around the shack. The book becomes a working instrument rather than merely a relic. Each entry offers a possibility, and each possibility points back towards Gravity Falls. Inside the shack, dust rests along the table's wooden grain, filling old scratches and small dents. The journal's pages catch the light in different shades, from warm cream near the center to brown along the edges. Paper fibers rise slightly where erasures have thinned the surface. A graphite line crosses a drawing of a horned creature, suggesting that the author pressed hard while writing. The monocle remains attached by its cord, lying beside a corner marked with a faint water stain. The smell of old binding mingles with pine smoke, dry timber, and the cool mineral scent entering through a loose window frame. Beyond the glass, the forest is a layered arrangement of trunks and shadow. Within the room, each page holds its own small silence. The more Dipper studies the journal, the more clearly he sees that the author recorded patterns rather than isolated accidents. A strange event near the lake resembles one described in an older entry. A mark found on a tree appears again in a coded margin. A creature dismissed as a local rumor has a full page of observations, including its habits during certain phases of the moon. Gravity Falls begins to look less like a town where odd things occasionally occur and more like a place organized around hidden pressures. The journals are connected with that concealed history, even when Journal 3 does not explain every link. Dipper realizes that the book is not complete in itself. It is one part of a larger account, and the missing volumes may contain the answers that matter most. Outside the shack, evening settles slowly over the forest, turning the nearest trunks blue and the distant hills gray. The window glass cools beneath the fading light, and condensation gathers along its lower edge. You can hear insects beginning their night sounds beneath the porch, each call separate from the next. Inside, the table remains warm from the day, although the journal's cover feels cool where shadows reach it. The burgundy leather carries the smell of rain, dust, and old binding. A page lifts slightly in the moving air and returns with a soft brush. The gold six-fingered hand is almost black now, except for a narrow glimmer along the number 3. The forest waits beyond the window without appearing to move. Journal 3 becomes one of the series' principal mystery objects because it continues to connect separate events. Its pages guide Dipper towards creatures, places, and questions that would otherwise remain unrelated. The book does not solve every mystery, and its codes often create new uncertainty instead of removing it. Yet its presence changes the scale of the story. Dipper is no longer investigating a handful of unusual experiences. He is following traces left by the author through a town whose past has been deliberately obscured. Mabel continues to see the journal as exciting proof, while Dipper feels the weight of its warnings beneath the excitement. Together, they carry the book between curiosity and caution. The number 3 becomes a quiet sign that other pages, volumes, and secrets may still be waiting. Night gathers in the corners of the room, leaving the table illuminated by a narrow lamp. The light reveals the uneven leather, the worn gold, and the fine dust settled around the journal's hinges. Pencil lines seem softer at night, while the dark warnings retain their authority. The monocle cord lies in a loose curve, its fibers visible where the thread has frayed. When the book closes, the cover makes a muted sound against the wood, and the old binding settles with a final creak. Beyond the walls, the forest floor cools beneath roots and stones. Needles release the day's warmth into the air, while damp earth gathers the smell of shadow. The room holds the book quietly, as though its secrets require no further movement. Dipper keeps the journal close, and the summer begins to move according to its pages. A walk becomes a search for markings. A rumor becomes a possible entry. An ordinary object may conceal a sign connected to the author or to gravity, Fools's hidden history. He reads, compares, records, and returns to places where the journal's descriptions seem unfinished. The forest near Gravity Falls remains the place of discovery, with its metal tree, damp roots, and concealed hollow. The burgundy cover remains marked by the gold six-fingered hand, and the number 3 remains visible within it. The journal's presence turns the long summer into an investigation that has only just begun. The last light fades from the window, leaving the trees as quiet vertical shapes. A few needles rest against the glass, held there by moisture and the slow movement of air. Beneath the table, darkness gathers around its legs and spreads across the floorboards. The scent of old binding remains close to the closed journal, mingling with faint smoke from the dying fire. Paper fibers soften in the warm room, while the damaged leather keeps the cold memory of the forest. Somewhere outside, a small animal moves through leaves and stops. The silence after it passes is broad and untroubled. The monocle cord lies still against the cover. The six-fingered hand, the number 3, and the burgundy leather rest together beneath the lamp's final circle of light. The author's journal remains a bridge between what Dipper has seen and what Gravity Falls has concealed. Its drawings preserve forms that should not exist. Its notes preserve places that official maps ignore, and its warnings preserve the experience of someone who reached the secrets before him. The 3 journals form a series, but Journal 3 is the volume that enters Dipper's hands first. Its discovery in the forest gives the story a physical center, a damaged object with a history that can be held, opened, and followed. Beneath the metal tree, the book had waited among roots and stones. Inside the mystery shack, it begins to change the meaning of every unusual sound. The summer no longer belongs only to boredom, games, and passing days. It belongs to the forest, the journals, and the mysteries beneath the town. The room grows quiet enough for the smallest textures to become clear. The wood of the table feels smooth beneath one palm and rough beneath the other, marked by years of use. A cool draft travels along the floorboards, carrying the clean scent of wet ground from the open doorway. Near the lamp, dust hangs briefly in the air before settling. The journal remains closed, its corners worn and its cover softly reflecting the amber light. You can almost feel the paper inside, layered and patient, waiting beneath leather and thread. The forest beyond the shack has become a patient arrangement of trunks, needles, and faint silver leaves. Under the trees, the metal tree keeps its secret hollow. Within the book, the author's lines remain ready to lead Dipper farther into Gravity Falls. You are seated near the window of the shack, where a single desk lamp pools its yellow light over paper, leather, and the narrow shadow of Dipper's hand. Outside, Gravity Falls is settling into the quiet that follows a long summer day, while crickets vibrate beyond the open window. Cool night air enters through the shack's loose boards, carrying the dry scent of pine, dust, and old timber. Dipper bends over the journal with his shoulders drawn forward, reading as though the pages might shift when he looks away. The dry scratch of a pencil moves in the margins, marking a question beside a drawing of a long-limbed figure. Near the lamp, the ink seems almost blue, although the room is filled with amber light. The town beyond the glass is becoming indistinct, with roofs and trees blending into one patient darkness. Within the book, the author's lines are ready to lead Dipper farther into Gravity Falls. The journal describes paranormal and supernatural beings found in Gravity Falls, but it does not read like a collection of pleasant folk tales. Its pages are encyclopedic in style, arranging observations beside illustrations, measurements beside rumors, and warnings beside hurried corrections. You see careful drawings of claws, eyes, teeth, shadows, and strange marks left in the soil. A description may begin with the calm language of a naturalist, then turn sharply towards danger before the entry has reached its final line. Some creatures are given names, while others are identified only by habits, locations, or the sounds they make after midnight. The author has spent years recording the strange life of Gravity Falls, and the accumulated knowledge carries the weight of long exposure. Each illustration appears to have been made in difficult circumstances, perhaps beneath a weak lantern, perhaps while something watched from the trees. The book is a catalogue, though never a neutral academic catalogue. You watch Dipper read the entry twice, first from the beginning and then from the warning near the bottom of the page. It concerns a being that can imitate familiar forms, changing its appearance while preserving a few telltale details. The words are partly hidden beneath a layer of hurried symbols, as though the author feared that ordinary readers might understand too much. A line in the margin mentions eyes that do not blink at the proper rhythm, and another refers to footsteps that remain too light for the body they accompany. Through the open window, a figure passes between the trees and the far edge of the clearing. Dipper's pencil stops moving. The lamp catches the edge of his face, and his expression changes from curiosity to immediate concern. You remain beside him as he closes the journal halfway, keeping one finger between the pages. The summer evening has offered him a shape, and the book has supplied a possible name. The air around the shack is cool enough to raise a faint prickle along your arms, though the wooden floor still holds the warmth of the day. Crickets vibrate beyond the window in overlapping pulses, their music rising and fading like breath through grass. The desk lamp makes a small island of brightness, leaving the rafters above it in brown shadow. Paper edges lift whenever the night wind slips through the loose boards, then settle with a soft, dry movement. The journal's leather cover feels rough beneath Dipper's palm, while the exposed page carries the faint smell of glue, dust, and aged ink. A pencil lies beside the lamp, its sharpened point darkened by use. From the forest comes the distant knock of one branch against another, followed by silence. The figure outside is gone now, and the clearing looks harmless again, with only thin leaves trembling beneath the stars. Dipper follows the evidence too quickly, carrying the journal beneath his sweater as he leaves the room. The description of the shape-changing creature has joined itself to a face he has already seen around the shack. Norman, polite and soft-spoken, has been spending time near Mabel, and the coincidence seems too precise for Dipper to ignore. You move with him through the corridor, where floorboards creak beneath hurried steps, and the lamp behind you grows smaller. The investigation begins with a glance through a window, continues with whispered observations, and soon becomes a pursuit through the summer darkness. Dipper notices the details that other characters overlook, including an odd posture, a suspicious silence, and the way Norman avoids direct questions. Yet the journal's warning is incomplete, and the missing parts matter. What appears to be evidence may only be a fragment, while the creature's true description remains concealed beneath code and uncertainty. Beyond the shack, the ground is soft with old needles, and your steps make almost no sound as you cross the edge of the clearing. The night air moves across your face with the coolness of water drawn from a deep well. Tall pines gather overhead, their branches turning the starlight into narrow silver threads. Somewhere close by, a moth brushes against a leaf, creating a small papery tremor that disappears beneath the crickets. The smell of resin lingers around the trunks, mingled with damp earth and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Dipper's shoes disturb a scatter of cones, and one rolls slowly downhill before stopping against a root. In the distance, the shack's windows glow through the trees, each pane holding a different shade of domestic warmth. The forest seems peaceful, though the quiet contains many separate sounds, and each sound appears to belong to something with its own intentions. In Tourist Trapped, Dipper believes Norman may be a zombie, and the thought settles over the investigation with grim certainty. You see him compare Norman's behavior with the journal's drawings, searching for signs of decay, unnatural movement, or the particular hunger described in one anxious paragraph. The apparent zombie mystery is tied to Mabel's romantic storyline, which gives every clue a second meaning and every conversation an additional complication. Mabel is delighted by Norman's attention, while Dipper studies him with suspicion, attempting to protect her from something he has not yet proved exists. His warning comes out too seriously, and Mabel's confidence turns the pursuit into comic confusion. The more affection she shows, the more urgently Dipper searches for proof. The journal has transformed an ordinary social uncertainty into a supernatural case, and the possibility of a monster now stands beside the more familiar fear of a sister being hurt. The summer darkness rests lightly over the path, softened by the distant glow of the town. Dry pine needles give way to patches of dusty soil, where small stones press through the surface like pale knuckles. A breeze passes along your neck, entering through gaps in your clothing before slipping onward between the trees. The crickets continue their steady vibration, but now you hear the occasional rustle of a small animal beneath the fern leaves. From the shack comes a muffled voice, followed by the faint thump of something falling in a nearby room. The smell of warm wood remains behind you, while the forest carries colder scents of moss and stone. Above the branches, the moon is hidden by passing cloud, and the path loses its silver outline. Dipper's flashlight opens a narrow tunnel through the darkness, catching floating insects and pale fragments of bark before moving on. Dipper's reading is interrupted by immediate events around the shack, because gravity falls seldom permits a mystery to remain quietly theoretical. A door slams somewhere behind you. Mabel calls from the porch, and the sound sends Dipper turning away from the path. He keeps one hand on the journal while he listens, as though the book itself might offer instructions. Its warnings are often cryptic, and the few readable words do not explain whether the creature is dangerous, lonely, hungry, or merely misunderstood. The author writes some passages in code to protect their meaning, hiding information considered too dangerous for careless readers. Dipper has learned that the missing sentences may be more important than the visible ones. He returns to the shack with his suspicion intact, finding that the night has placed new evidence beside the old. The journal is already becoming part of the event rather than a safe record of events that have finished. Inside the main room, the desk lamp remains the brightest object in the shack, its light pooling over the open journal and leaving the furniture beyond it indistinct. The floorboards hold the uneven marks of years, with dark grooves where boots and chairs have passed repeatedly. Night air stirs the curtains without lifting them fully. Beyond the window, crickets press their sound gently against the glass. The dry scratch of a pencil returns as Dipper circles a phrase and copies a symbol beneath it. Mabel's voice drifts from another room, bright and confident, then becomes quiet as she listens for an answer. A cup of cocoa has been abandoned beside the book, its surface filmed with cooling skin. Dust hangs briefly in the lamp's beam before settling onto the table. The room feels occupied by paper, shadows, and the patient pressure of unwritten explanations. The first episode connects the journal with the question of whether someone is changing shape, and that question gives the early pages their uneasy direction. You watch Dipper compare the creature's entry with the figure he believes he has seen, building a chain of conclusions from very small details. He studies posture, movement, clothing, and expression, convinced that the journal has provided a key to a hidden identity. His attention is sharp, but his judgment is hurried, and the two qualities do not always lead to the same place. Mabel's romantic storyline draws the investigation into a tangle of embarrassment, loyalty, and theatrical suspicion. Dipper's concern is genuine, although his certainty grows faster than the evidence. The journal has helped him notice what other characters overlook, yet it has also encouraged him to fit every unusual detail into a supernatural pattern. In Gravity Falls, knowledge can sharpen the eye while quietly misleading the mind. A thin line of moonlight appears beneath the clouds, touching the floor near the table with a color colder than the lamp's amber glow. The journal's pages cast narrow shadows over one another, and the inked illustrations seem deeper where the light cannot reach them. A pencil shaving rests beside Dipper's wrist, curled like a tiny wooden ribbon. The air carries the scent of paper warmed by the lamp, together with the mineral smell of rain that has not yet arrived. Beyond the window, branches sway at different speeds, revealing that the trees are not moving as one body. A cricket stops for several seconds, and the sudden absence makes the room seem larger. Then the insect begins again, joined by another voice farther away. Mabel crosses the hallway in soft slippers, and her steps create a faint rhythm beneath the continuing scratch of Dipper's pencil. The apparent zombie mystery is eventually explained, and Norman is revealed to be not what Dipper first assumes. The truth is less monstrous and more complicated, involving an ordinary social disguise mistaken for a supernatural transformation. You watch Dipper's theory loosen as the evidence is brought into the light, while Mabel's confidence survives the confusion with remarkable ease. The creature from the journal has not been found in Norman, and the fear that shaped the evening begins to recede. Yet the book has not been disproved. Its warning was never a simple statement that Norman must be a zombie, nor did it promise that every suspicious figure would belong to the species described. Instead, the journal offered a method of attention, encouraging Dipper to look closely at the town's small irregularities. The mystery is solved, but the pages remain open, and the unexplained author still stands behind them. The room grows quieter after the misunderstanding has been settled, though the shack never becomes completely still. A loose shutter taps once against the outer wall, then pauses beneath the pressure of the wind. The desk lamp continues to warm the table, and its light gathers on the journal's worn corners. Cool air travels through the boards and settles around your ankles, carrying the smell of pine needles and old canvas. The cocoa beside the book has lost its heat, leaving only a faint sweetness near the rim of the cup. Outside, the crickets continue with a slower, more scattered pattern. Leaves brush together in the forest, producing a sound like distant pages turned by an unseen hand. Dipper's pencil lies still for a moment, but the marks already made across the margins give the paper a restless appearance. The night has passed through suspicion and returned to quiet without becoming ordinary. Dipper turns back to the pages and finds that the first mystery has only opened the door. The entry about changing forms leads towards notes on other beings, other locations, and other incidents that the town has treated as isolated accidents. A collapsed trail, a missing object, an impossible footprint, and a story told by an elderly shopkeeper begin to resemble parts of one arrangement. The journal's creatures connect local anecdotes with a wider hidden system, suggesting that Gravity Falls has been shaped by forces beneath its visible routines. The early entries establish that the town's mysteries are related rather than random. You see Dipper draw lines between names and places, crossing one page with another until the book resembles a map of concealed relationships. The author's years of recording have made the strange life of Gravity Falls legible in fragments. Each fragment remains uncertain, but together they imply a design. The lamp leaves the walls in darkness, while its narrow brightness settles over the illustrations and the small, crowded handwriting. You are close enough to see where the paper has been pressed by a heavy pen, making shallow valleys in the fibers. The dry scratch of a pencil returns, quiet and regular, as Dipper copies a symbol whose meaning is not yet clear. Air slips through a seam in the wall and cools the side of your face. From beyond the window, crickets pulse beneath the larger hush of the forest. A faint smell of dust rises whenever the journal is turned, followed by the sharper scent of ink. The pages make different sounds depending on their age, some whispering softly, others giving a dry little crack near the binding. On the porch, the boards hold traces of warm daylight, although the surrounding air has become distinctly nocturnal. Shadows gather beneath the table and remain there undisturbed. The journal is not presented as a neutral academic catalogue, because the author's tone combines field notes, anxiety, humor, and secrecy. A margin may contain a precise anatomical observation beside a nervous question, followed by a joke intended to steady the hand writing it. One illustration is carefully labeled, while another is surrounded by arrows, crossed-out guesses, and a warning written at an angle. The book records knowledge, but it also records the emotional cost of obtaining that knowledge. You watch Dipper recognize himself in the author's habits, especially in the desire to understand danger before danger has fully revealed itself. The resemblance is not comforting. The author has spent years recording strange life, yet the notes suggest that observation did not guarantee safety. Some pages are confident, others nearly frantic, and several retreat into code when the subject becomes too perilous. The journal's silence is therefore part of its testimony. The wood beneath your hand is smooth in places and splintered in others, bearing the uneven texture of a building that has survived many seasons. Warmth remains close to the lamp, while the corners of the room hold the cooler breath of the night. A small beetle circles the glass shade and makes a faint, ticking sound whenever its wings touch the metal. The crickets outside answer one another across the clearing, with no single rhythm ruling the whole evening. Paper dust clings to the table's edge, and a thread from the journal's binding has come loose near Dipper's thumb. The window admits the resinous smell of pine, damp earth, and leaves cooling beneath the stars. Somewhere above the ceiling, a small creature moves from one beam to another. Its steps are too soft to identify, but they remind the room that the shack is never entirely sealed. As Dipper investigates further, the book's warnings become more important because later discoveries depend upon distinctions hidden inside its incomplete entries. A creature that appears harmless may possess a dangerous second habit, while a seemingly hostile being may be protecting a boundary that nobody else can see. The warnings do not arrive as tidy conclusions, and Dipper must compare separate observations before he can understand what they imply. You watch him return to earlier pages, searching for repeated symbols and familiar phrases. The journal's code creates delays, but it also preserves information from careless readers who might use it without restraint. Its secrecy is not decorative. It reflects the author's belief that certain knowledge can cause harm simply by being understood. The pages therefore ask for caution as well as curiosity. Dipper is learning that a field guide may contain instructions, confessions, traps, and unfinished arguments all at once. Night air moves across the floor in thin currents, gathering beneath the table before dispersing near the walls. The desk lamp's light pools over an illustration of a creature with too many joints, leaving its outer limbs partly submerged in shadow. The paper feels dry and faintly brittle beneath your fingertips, while the leather cover retains a soft, worn resistance. Crickets sound beyond the open window, seeming nearer whenever the room falls silent. A pencil rolls a few centimeters across the table, stopped by the raised edge of a notebook. The smell of cedar rises from the floorboards, mingling with the faint odor of wax and cooled chocolate. Curtains breathe inward, then settle against the sill. Outside, the trees appear almost motionless, although individual needles tremble where the wind reaches them. The lamp hums quietly, and the darkness beyond its circle remains without shape. The series repeatedly turns a monster entry into a clue about a larger mystery, and Dipper begins to understand that pattern during these early investigations. A drawing may identify a creature, but the surrounding notes reveal who was searching for it, what place it inhabited, or which symbol appeared nearby. The monster is only one part of the information. Its existence points towards a buried history, an absent person, a concealed machine, or a door that should not have been opened. You see Dipper mark the edge of one page and then consult another, building a chain that extends beyond the immediate problem. The strange being described in the journal may disappear from the story, yet its entry continues to cast meaning over later events. This is why the book remains unexplained even after Norman's identity is known. The first creature has been understood, while the architecture behind the creatures has only begun to emerge. A soft breeze presses against the shack, making the loose boards answer with low wooden creaks. The desk lamp steadies itself after a brief flicker, and the pool of light returns to the same worn page. The night smells of wet bark, though the ground outside is still dry, and the scent seems to come from somewhere deeper among the trees. Crickets maintain their scattered chorus beyond the window, joined by the occasional high note of an unseen bird. Your sleeve brushes the table, disturbing a few pencil shavings that slide towards the journal's spine. The margins are crowded with small marks, some made recently and others faded into the paper. A thread of cooler air touches your wrists, then vanishes through another gap in the wall. The forest beyond the shack has become a patient arrangement of trunks, needles, and faint silver leaves. Beneath them, old paths continue towards places the lamp cannot illuminate. Dipper's reading is repeatedly interrupted by immediate events, yet each interruption gives the journal a stronger presence in his mind. A knock at the door, a strange cry from the roof, or a sudden movement in the yard draws him away from the page. When he returns, the words seem to have changed only because the surrounding circumstances have changed. The book becomes a companion to investigation, offering possible explanations while refusing to offer certainty. Its creatures are not arranged for easy reading, and its warnings often end just before the most useful detail. You watch Dipper become more patient with these gaps, treating uncertainty as evidence of the author's situation rather than as a flaw in the record. Somewhere behind the code lies a person who was afraid of being followed, copied, or understood by the wrong mind. The journal's secrecy gives every interruption a second edge, as though danger may be approaching from outside the room. The lamp's amber glow rests on the page like a thin blanket, warming the drawing without reaching the darkness around it. Beyond the window, cool air passes over the porch and enters through the shack's loose boards, carrying a faint taste of rain. Crickets vibrate among the grass, their sounds rising from several directions and fading without resolution. The table is rough beneath your forearms, marked by shallow scratches that catch against the fabric of your sleeve. Paper edges brush together whenever Dipper shifts his hand, producing a delicate murmur beneath the louder creak of the building. A moth has settled on the window frame, its wings closed into a pale triangle. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pipe clicks as it cools. The room retains the warmth of people, food, and lamplight, but the surrounding forest presses close enough to make the walls seem temporary. The night continues beyond every boundary. The author's entries reveal a mind trying to classify a world that will not remain classified. Names are assigned, patterns are tested, and illustrations are corrected when the creatures refuse to behave as expected. You watch Dipper read a note that begins with measurements and ends with a warning not to trust the reflection of a familiar face. Another passage describes a sound heard beneath the ground, while a small joke in the margin makes the danger seem briefly manageable. The mixture of humor and anxiety gives the journal its human character. It is not merely a source of facts, because every fact has been gathered by someone who feared what it might reveal. The book's encyclopedic style, therefore, conceals a narrative of endurance. Years of observation have accumulated into pages, and those pages preserve traces of the person who stood in forests, caves, attics, and abandoned roads, writing while the strange life of gravity falls moved around them. The window has grown darker as the clouds gather, although the lamp continues to hold its small territory on the desk. Cool air enters through the boards in intermittent breath, carrying dampness from the creek and the green smell of ferns. The crickets sound almost metallic now, their vibrations joining the tiny rattle of leaves against the sill. A pencil mark darkens the margin where Dipper has pressed too firmly, leaving a shallow groove on the reverse side. The journal's pages are not all the same color. Some have yellowed to the shade of straw, while others remain gray and cold. The leather cover gives off the faint odor of oil, dust, and the hands that have carried it. Under the table, a floorboard shifts with a patient sigh. Beyond the clearing, the forest keeps its layers of darkness, each one hiding a different distance. The first warnings establish that the creatures of Gravity Falls are not isolated curiosities, and that their stories belong to a deeper arrangement. Local anecdotes become connected through repeated symbols, unusual locations, and details that ordinary explanations cannot absorb. A tale told by a tourist may echo an observation recorded years earlier, while a childish rumor may preserve a fragment of something the author understood more clearly. Dipper consults the journal when he suspects that ordinary explanations are failing, but the book does not always tell him what to believe. Instead, it changes what he considers worth examining. You watch him set aside a convenient answer and return to the margins, where a half-erased line points towards another page. The creatures remain within the entries, but they also lead outwards towards the town's hidden system. Each warning widens the map, and each new mark makes the familiar streets less simple. Rain begins somewhere beyond the trees, first as a soft ticking on leaves, and later as a fine sound against the roof. The air entering through the loose boards becomes cooler, carrying the dark fragrance of wet soil. The desk lamp gathers brightness on the journal's center, while the outer edges of the table fade into brown shadow. Crickets fall silent one by one, leaving only the roof's delicate percussion and the occasional movement of branches. A bead of moisture forms on the window glass and travels slowly downward, bending the distant light of the town. The paper curls slightly near its corners, responding to the changing air. Dipper's pencil rests across the open spread, its wood pale beneath the lamp. The shack creaks in several places at once, as though the building is adjusting its weight. Outside, the forest receives the rain without surprise. The creature connected with Norman has been explained, but the journal remains unexplained, and that distinction matters. Dipper's first theory has failed, yet the book's existence still demands a larger question about its author, its missing sections, and the reason it was hidden beneath the tree. The early investigation has taught him that a wrong conclusion can grow from a right observation. He truly saw something unusual, and the journal truly contains warnings about beings that do not fit ordinary categories. The mistake lay in joining those truths too quickly. You watch Dipper place a small mark beside the entry, not as a final answer, but as a reminder of the distance between evidence and certainty. Mabel's romantic confusion has ended in laughter, while the book's silence has become more serious. The social mystery has closed, and the deeper mystery has opened wider. Rain traces fine lines across the window, and the lamp reflects in each one as a trembling yellow point. The room smells of wet timber, old paper, and the faint sweetness left by the abandoned cocoa. Cool air moves along the floor, slipping through gaps that have widened with age. Beyond the glass, the trees are reduced to dark vertical shapes, while the porch roof gathers a steady pattern of drops. The desk lamp pools light over the journal's open pages, making the illustrations appear isolated from the world around them. The dry scratch of a pencil returns, joined by the soft turn of paper. Crickets have disappeared beneath the rain, though an occasional insect calls from somewhere sheltered. Your hand rests near the leather binding, feeling its worn grain and the shallow ridge where the cover has been folded. The night has become a room of water, wood, ink, and patient attention. Dipper turns another page and finds a passage that does not describe a creature at all. It refers to a place, a sequence of dates, and a pattern of disappearances that seem unrelated until they are placed beside the earlier entries. The author has connected beings with locations, locations with events, and events with an unseen structure extending beneath gravity falls. Some lines are written plainly, while others have been replaced by symbols that resist immediate interpretation. The coded passages protect their meaning, but they also make the surviving words feel more urgent. You see Dipper copy the dates carefully, repeating the names of places beneath his breath, as though memorization might prevent them from fading. The book's warnings are no longer simply about what may be hiding in the forest. They concern what the forest, the town, and the shack may already have been hiding from one another. The rain softens, leaving drops to fall separately from the roof's edge. The lamp's glow appears warmer after the storm, and the desk surface shines in small patches where moisture has entered through the window. A scent of pine rises from outside, sharpened by the wet needles covering the ground. The loose boards give occasional quiet clicks as they cool. Somewhere near the chimney, water follows a hidden path and taps inside the wall. The journal's leather cover has darkened slightly at one corner, while its pages hold the dry, fibrous texture of old cloth. A pencil shaving clings to the cuff of your sleeve. Beyond the shack, the forest is almost black, though narrow spaces between branches reveal fragments of washed sky. The air no longer carries the heat of summer afternoon. It has become clean, cool, and close to the earth. Dipper cannot know whether the author completed the journal, abandoned it, or was prevented from writing further. He can only follow the evidence left in the margins, where humor sometimes breaks through fear and code, sometimes replaces confession. The entries about supernatural beings are therefore also entries about the person who encountered them. Their warnings preserve habits of caution, while their gaps preserve the shape of danger. You watch Dipper understand that the journal has been written from within the mystery rather than from a safe distance. It does not stand above Gravity Falls as an impartial authority. It belongs to the town's hidden system, carrying its marks, its omissions, and perhaps its unfinished purpose. The book records the strange world because the strange world has already touched the book. The air around you remains cool, though the lamp warms the side of your face and the table beneath your hands. The open window frames wet branches, dark needles, and a single pale moth sheltering beneath the eaves. Water gathers on the sill, forming a narrow reflective line beside the journal. The room has taken on the quiet smell of rain-soaked wood, pencil shavings, and leather softened by years of handling. Without the crickets, every small movement becomes distinct. A page turns with a faint flutter, the roof answers with a final drop, and the floor shifts under the weight of the building. The desk lamp hums steadily, its light reaching only as far as the nearest chair. Shadows occupy the rest of the shack without becoming threatening. They are simply the unlit portions of the room, waiting beside the brightness. The book's importance grows because Dipper keeps returning to it after each explanation has fallen short. He consults its drawings when a footprint seems too large, its warnings when a voice sounds almost familiar, and its coded passages when a simple answer feels carefully arranged. The journal helps him notice details that other characters overlook, but it also teaches him that noticing is only the beginning. Interpretation requires patience, comparison, and a willingness to leave some questions open. The first mystery has shown him the danger of confusing resemblance with identity. The next mysteries will ask him to distinguish a warning from a clue from a trap, and a record from a confession. You remain beside the lamp as Dipper writes the date in the margin, then writes the place again beneath it. Gravity Falls appears in the ink, repeated across the page like a name that cannot be safely forgotten. The rain has passed beyond the valley, and a faint clearing appears among the clouds. Wet leaves reflect the moon in broken fragments, while the ground outside gives off the deep smell of mud and roots. The desk lamp pools its light over the journal, and the dampness at the window makes the brightness tremble. Cool air enters through the shack's loose boards, brushing your hands before disappearing beneath the furniture. A few crickets begin again in the grass, tentative at first, then steadier as the silence relaxes. The pencil's wooden body is smooth where Dipper's fingers have worn it down. Paper fibers rise along a torn edge, catching the light like fine threads. Somewhere in the rafters, the small hidden animal settles into stillness. The forest beyond the shack holds its wet darkness, and every tree seems rooted in a story that began before the lamp was lit. Dipper closes the journal only after copying the final symbol from the page, though the gesture has none of the certainty of completion. The cover returns to its place with a muted sound, and the worn corners reflect the amber light. Norman has been explained, the apparent zombie mystery has dissolved, and Mabel's romantic adventure has returned to the ordinary uncertainties of affection. Yet the journal's creatures remain waiting in their entries, attached to dates, places, warnings, and clues that extend beyond the evening. The early pages have shown Dipper that Gravity Falls is not a collection of random oddities. Its mysteries are related, and the connections may lead towards the author himself. You sit in the quiet room as Dipper keeps one hand on the leather cover, listening to the crickets beyond the window. The first warnings have passed into the deeper night, where the creatures within the book are only the beginning. You remain beside the open journal while the crickets continue beyond the window, and the creatures within its pages begin to gather into a quieter pattern. Gravity Falls is not merely a town where unusual things happen by accident. It is a place where folklore, cryptids, ghosts, invented creatures, and old rumors repeatedly cross the paths of ordinary people. Each account seems separate when first encountered, yet Journal 3 gives these legends a shared vocabulary. A drawing of claws can sit near a warning about spirits, while a note concerning time, travel appears beside a description of gnomes. Dipper begins to understand that the journal is not simply a catalogue of monsters. It is an index of disturbances arranged across the landscape. The supernatural catalogue gradually points towards the author's identity, although the person behind the handwriting remains hidden beyond the opening episodes. Still, water lies beneath a pale afternoon sky, smooth enough to reflect the slow movement of clouds. At the edge of the lake, boat ropes knock softly against a wooden dock, making a patient sound that travels across the empty shore. Wet stones shine between patches of dark algae, and the smell of lake air rises from the shallows with a cool, mineral freshness. The boards beneath your feet hold the warmth of the sun, though their edges remain damp where the water has reached them. A dragonfly moves above the reeds, pauses in the light, and disappears among the narrow stems. Across the lake, the forest forms a long, uneven wall of green, with darker spaces where the branches overlap. Nothing breaks the surface except a faint ring spreading from some unseen point. For a moment, the water seems to hold its breath, and the whole shore becomes a place where an old story might still be waiting. The second episode, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, originally aired on 29 June 2012, carrying the twins beyond the familiar orbit of the Mystery Shack. A lakeside legend gives Dipper and Mabel a reason to leave the house, the porch, and the strange comfort of the surrounding clearing. The story centers on a supposed lake monster, a creature known through local talk before it is known through evidence. Dipper sees the possibility of a genuine discovery, while Mabel sees an afternoon adventure with a dramatic name and an appealing shape. Their methods differ, but the twins regularly investigate together, moving through the same uncertainty from opposite directions. The possibility of a monster turns an outing into a quiet field investigation. Dipper searches for traces, measurements, and visual clues, while Mabel turns the journey into play, friendship, and performance. Around them, Gravity Falls expands from a single house into a wider geography of unanswered questions. The dock extends into the lake like a narrow wooden finger, its grain raised beneath the soles of your feet. Small waves touch the supporting posts and withdraw with a soft, dragging sound, leaving thin lines of foam around the submerged wood. A coil of rope rests beside a metal cleat, rough fibers darkened by old rain and the touch of many hands. The air carries algae, wet bark, and the faint sweetness of crushed reeds. Sunlight rests on the water in broken pieces, too bright to follow for long. Somewhere behind you, a loose shutter taps against a wall, but the sound arrives softened by distance and leaves the shore calm again. The lake is broad enough to make the opposite bank appear still, even when branches bend in the moving air. You stand between land and water, with the forest behind you and the legend spread quietly across the shining surface. Dipper's investigations often begin with a single visual clue, and the lake offers many shapes that could become meaningful once placed inside the journal. A ripple might indicate a fish, a submerged branch, or the passage of something far larger. A damaged boat might show careless use, or it might suggest that the legend has a physical history. Mabel does not reject evidence, but she gives it another kind of importance. She sees the adventure as a story to enjoy, a chance to invent costumes, voices, and friendships around a mystery that would otherwise remain cold and distant. Dipper wants to organize the facts, while Mabel wants to keep the experience alive. The twins continue side by side, sharing a boat, a path, or a worried glance whenever the evidence becomes more convincing. Their difference becomes a form of balance, allowing the strange event to be both investigated and felt. A forest path begins where the dock ends, and the packed earth carries a thin scattering of pale stones from the lakeside. The afternoon light narrows beneath overlapping branches, turning the trail into a series of soft green rooms. Ferns brush your ankles, releasing a cool scent when their leaves bend against your clothes. Pine needles gather in shallow hollows, muffling footsteps until only the occasional twig gives way beneath you. The lake remains visible through gaps in the trees, though each opening closes quickly as the path curves away. Insects hum above the bracken, and a woodpecker calls from somewhere beyond the darker trunks. The temperature falls gradually under the canopy, not with a sudden chill, but through the steady absence of direct sun. Moisture clings to the bark, and the ground feels springy beneath the carpet of leaves. The trail seems ordinary, yet every bend suggests that the landscape contains more than its surface reveals. The lake monster is important not only because it may exist, but because the legend changes the scale of the twins' attention. The mystery shack remains their center, yet the second episode shows that strange events do not wait around the house for anyone to discover them. The surrounding lake, forest, roads, and abandoned places become part of the same investigative territory. Each new legend adds another point to the imagined geography of Gravity Falls. A creature reported beside the water belongs to a different corner of the town than a ghost appearing in a house, yet the journal places both within one system of signs. The residents do not all recognize the significance of these events. Some see only a damaged boat, a local prank, or a story told to children. Dipper reads the details differently, because the journal has taught him that the town's legends may be possible evidence rather than harmless stories. The shore grows quieter as the afternoon moves towards evening, and the pale sky takes on a warmer color above the motionless water. A low breeze reaches your face from the lake, carrying the scent of algae and the clean coldness of deeper water. The boat ropes knock against the dock in an uneven rhythm, sometimes touching wood twice before the next wave passes beneath them. Wet stones press against the mud at the waterline, their surfaces dark and smooth beneath a thin glaze. Near the reeds, small bubbles rise and vanish without a visible source. The forest path behind you has become a dim green corridor, its branches joining overhead like a loosely woven ceiling. A bird crosses the opening above the lake and leaves no disturbance below. Even the ordinary sounds seem arranged into a patient pattern, as if the shore were keeping a careful record of everything that moves. The early season continues to place the twins among different forms of the supernatural. Headhunters and the hand that rocks the Mabel introduce further mysteries, while the inconveniencing carries them into another kind of danger. The episodes do not all involve the same creature or the same threat, but together they enlarge the range of what Gravity Falls can contain. The first season includes stories involving gnomes, ghosts, monsters, and time travel, allowing the town's folklore to move between comedy, fear, and uncertainty. Dipper keeps looking for rules beneath the variety. Mabel meets each new strangeness with an energy that makes the unknown less lonely. Their investigations remain collaborative, even when one twin reaches for a notebook and the other reaches for a costume, a joke, or a friend. A thin layer of cloud passes over the lake, and the reflected sky loses its brightness without becoming dark. Shadows collect beneath the dock, where green water moves around the posts and carries fragments of leaf towards the reeds. The planks feel cooler now, and their damp edges give off the smell of old timber. Rope fibers creak whenever the boat shifts, followed by the soft knock of wood against wood. Along the shore, algae forms a dark fringe between clear water and mud. The forest path has lost its afternoon color, with brown trunks and gray stones emerging from the green. A few drops fall from the branches, although no rain has begun, released by leaves that have held the earlier moisture. The sound is delicate and irregular, like fingers touching a table from far away. You remain near the water while the first suggestion of dusk settles across the lake. The journal's creature drawings begin to resemble a map of recurring disturbances rather than a collection of isolated illustrations. A gnome belongs to one region of experience, a ghost to another, and a lake monster to the boundary where wilderness and local memory meet. Yet each entry carries similar marks of caution, observation, and incomplete explanation. Dipper learns that one visual clue can lead towards an entire network of connected signs. A footprint may lead to a creature, the creature to an old account, and the old account to a location omitted from every ordinary map. The journal does not make the town simple. Instead, it gives the town a language in which its complications can be placed. Every new page enlarges the imagined geography, and every repeated name acquires weight through association. Gravity Falls becomes a landscape whose mysteries are separated by distance, but joined by the possibility of one hidden history. The last light rests in a narrow band above the opposite bank, while the water below turns from silver to muted blue. The air near the lake becomes colder against your hands, and the damp stones hold the chill of the evening. A strand of rope lies in a loose curve across the dock, its rough surface catching tiny grains of sand. Reeds lean together at the margin, making a dry whisper whenever the breeze passes through them. The smell of wet earth rises from the forest path, mixed with resin, leaf mold, and the faint sweetness of decaying wood. Branches overlap above the trail so completely that the way ahead seems to enter a separate, darker hour. A moth flutters near the dock lantern, touching the glass and drifting away. Beyond the small circle of light, the lake keeps its broad silence, concealing every shape beneath the surface. The season's legends also reveal how differently people interpret the same disturbance. A resident may encounter a ghost and remember an old family grievance, while Dipper records a manifestation with a location, a duration, and a possible cause. Mabel may respond by treating the ghost as a personality, offering friendship, or turning fear into a performance that can be shared. Neither approach completely explains the supernatural, but both allow the twins to remain near it without becoming paralyzed. Some mysteries are resolved within an episode, giving the town a temporary sense of order. Others remain open, leaving behind a question that continues to press against the edges of later events. The Journal 3 mystery continues through later episodes, and the book's missing author becomes more important with every strange discovery. The legends are not only stories about creatures, they are signs pointing towards the person who first gathered them. The forest path darkens beneath overlapping branches, where the final daylight appears as small pale shapes between leaves. Your footsteps settle into the soft covering of pine needles, and the ground gives slightly under each measured step. Damp bark reflects a little of the remaining sky, while moss gathers along the roots in thick, cool cushions. A scent of lake water follows you inland, mingling with crushed fern and the darker odor of mud. Somewhere near the shore, a rope knocks against wood once, then becomes still. The sound seems farther away than before, reduced to a memory carried through the trees. Insects continue their quiet evening work among the grasses, and a small animal moves through leaves without showing itself. The path bends around a stand of firs and opens briefly towards the water. There, the lake appears pale again, framed by the deepening forest like an old illustration. Summerween becomes another entry in the season's growing collection of local legends, and it aired on 5 October 2012, after the warmth of summer had begun to fade. Its title carries the familiar shape of a celebration, yet Gravity Falls gives the occasion an unsettling local character. The episode shows how the supernatural can settle into ordinary customs until people stop asking where those customs began. Residents participate in strange traditions without necessarily recognizing the larger significance of their actions. Mabel responds through performance, friendship, and the pleasure of transforming fear into shared play. Dipper searches for the rule behind the ritual, because a repeated custom can be evidence just as surely as a footprint or a drawing. The town's folklore is therefore both public and hidden. Everyone may take part in the story, while only a few people notice that the story has been watching them in return. Night reaches the lake gradually, beginning in the corners beneath the dock and spreading across the open water. The surface loses its remaining color until it reflects only a faint, broken strip of sky. Boat ropes knock softly against the wooden posts, their rhythm slower now as the wind settles. Wet stones appear almost black along the shore, and algae forms a low, dark border around the shallows. The smell of lake air becomes sharper in the coolness, carrying water, mud, and the green scent of submerged plants. Behind you, the forest path has become a narrow passage of shadow, where branches overlap into an unbroken canopy. A few leaves stir above your head, though the ground remains calm. The dock holds the day's warmth in sheltered places, and the lake holds the night in its deeper reaches. Nothing moves openly, but nothing feels entirely empty. Mabel and Dipper continue to show that investigation can be a shared practice even when its purposes differ. Dipper wants to classify the strange, because names and categories provide a little protection against confusion. Mabel wants to experience the strange as something that can be entered, performed, and remembered with another person. When a legend involves gnomes, she may see a society with customs and feelings rather than an entry in a bestiary. When a ghost appears, she may look for the loneliness beneath its anger. When a monster is reported near the lake, she can imagine the story from the creature's side as easily as from the twins' boat. Dipper still measures the evidence, and Mabel still changes the mood around it. Together, they turn the investigation into a conversation between careful attention and imaginative sympathy. The dock creaks beneath the night air, though no one stands upon the far end. Water touches the posts with a faint, repetitive hush, leaving narrow bands of brightness where the moon begins to rise. A length of rope shifts across the boards, dragged only by the changing angle of the boat. Its fibers make a dry rasp against the timber before becoming quiet again. The shore smells of wet stone and algae, with a colder note coming from the open lake. Along the forest margin, the path is almost invisible beneath the overlapping branches. The canopy breaks in one place, allowing a small patch of stars to appear between the leaves. A night bird calls once from the darkness and receives no answer. You breathe slowly beside the water, aware of the stillness, without needing to disturb it. The lake remains a dark page beneath the sky. The creatures of the first season are entertaining because they possess unusual forms, but their deeper purpose lies in the way they alter the town's meaning. Gnomes show that the forest can hold organized communities beyond human notice. Ghosts suggest that the past can remain active within ordinary rooms and family histories. Monsters make wilderness feel close enough to cross a road and enter a conversation. Time travel disturbs the order of dates themselves, while the journal attempts to restore a sequence among events that may not obey one. The legends offer different methods of questioning the town, from physical observation to memory and emotion. Dipper's evidence accumulates in notes, sketches, and repeated names. Mabel's understanding gathers through relationships, moods, and the stories people tell when they are frightened. The journal contains both kinds of knowledge, though it does not always explain how they belong together. Moonlight settles over the lake in a pale path that trembles whenever the water moves. The dockboards show thin lines of silver along their edges, while the spaces between them remain deep and dark. Cold air passes across your face from the open water, bringing the clean scent of distance and the heavier smell of algae near the shore. Reeds cast fine shadows across the shallows, where tiny insects disturb the surface in widening circles. The forest path recedes beneath its overlapping branches, with roots and stones hidden among the blackened needles. A wet leaf rests against one post, shining like a small piece of glass. Somewhere among the trees, branches bend and recover without revealing what touched them. The quiet has several layers, including water, leaves, insects, and the slow movement of wood. You stand within those sounds as the night becomes complete. The journal also teaches Dipper to regard absence as a kind of evidence. A page may contain a warning without an explanation, a drawing without a date, or a name whose importance becomes clear only much later. Some mysteries close neatly after the creature has been found, the ghost has departed, or the false story has been exposed. Other questions remain open because the event belongs to a larger design. The book follows the twins through later discoveries and deeper parts of the town. Every unanswered entry keeps the author present without showing his face. The supernatural catalogue gradually points towards his identity, not through one decisive revelation, but through accumulation. A symbol beside a monster, a location beneath a house, and a date attached to a warning may eventually form a sentence that the journal has been writing for years. The forest is nearly silent beneath the overlapping branches, though the lake can still be sensed beyond the trunks. Its water moves without visible color, and the occasional knock of a boat rope reaches you as a dull wooden pulse. The path has become soft and cool, covered with needles that release a faint resinous scent when pressed. Moss spreads over fallen limbs, holding moisture in its thick surface. A cluster of wet stones marks the edge of the trail, each one reflecting a fragment of moonlight. The air smells of dark soil, algae, and leaves beginning to decay. Tiny moths pass through the gaps between branches, appearing briefly before the darkness receives them. The forest does not seem hostile, yet its silence leaves room for every old account to return. You move slowly, carrying the lake's stillness with you into the trees. By night, the town feels full of separate stories that may belong to one hidden history. A lake monster waits in one account, a ghost occupies another, and the gnomes remain associated with a forest that most residents cross without suspicion. Summerween preserves its own ritual shape, while earlier episodes have already introduced legends that seem to belong to older layers of the town. The residents continue with ordinary lives because strange events do not announce their importance to everyone equally. Some people see only an amusing local incident, while the twins see another point on the growing map. Dipper arranges the signs in the journal, and Mabel keeps the human world around those signs from becoming cold. Their shared investigations give the legends movement, carrying them from the mystery shack to the lake, from the lake to the forest, and from the forest towards whatever lies beyond the visible town. The water lies still beneath the pale moon, with a narrow gleam stretching from the shore into the dark center of the lake. Boat ropes knock softly against the dock whenever a small wave reaches the posts. Wet stones remain cool beneath your fingertips, and algae clings to their edges in smooth green folds. The scent of lake air rises steadily, carrying traces of mud, reeds, and distant rain. Along the forest path, overlapping branches form a dark ceiling through which only scattered stars can be seen. Leaves shift high above you, while the lower undergrowth remains almost motionless. A single ripple opens near the reeds and widens until it disappears against the shore. No creature emerges, and no explanation follows. The lake keeps its legend without confirming it, leaving the possibility suspended between evidence and imagination. Dipper closes the journal only after adding another careful note, placing the lake beside the other locations that have begun to matter. The page contains no final answer because the evidence remains incomplete and the author remains concealed. Mabel stands nearby with the bright residue of the adventure still in her expression, carrying the story as something shared rather than solved. The twins have left the familiar orbit of the mystery shack and returned with a larger sense of the town beyond its walls. The legend of the Gobblewonker has become more than a tale about a supposed lake monster. It has opened a route into the wider landscape where legends gather. Gravity Falls now seems to extend beneath every road and between every ordinary house. The names, dates, creatures, and places wait together in the journal, patient as the lake beneath the moon. The last sound from the shore is a soft wooden knock, followed by the broad hush of water settling against the bank. The dock is empty beneath the night, its boards silvered at one end and darkened at the other. Damp stones line the edge like small, rounded fragments of the forest, while algae traces a quiet green boundary through the shallows. Cold lake air rests against your face and then drifts inland between the trunks. The forest path disappears under overlapping branches, where moss, roots, and wet leaves hold the shape of the evening. Above the water, the sky remains pale near the horizon and blacker overhead. The lake monster's legend, the journal's warnings, and the distant town all occupy the same sleeping landscape. Nothing needs to be settled before the darkness deepens. The stories remain where they are, connected beneath the surface, waiting in the silence of Gravity Falls. You are standing beside Dipper in the upper room of the Mystery Shack, where Journal 3 lies open beneath a small pool of lamplight. The main drawings show creatures, tunnels, symbols, and maps, yet the margins hold another kind of knowledge. Along the edges, black ink settles into the grooves of rough paper, gathering beside hurried arrows and narrow remarks. Dipper notices that the journal's margins are as important as its main drawings because warnings appear where an ordinary reader might leave empty space. Crooked Eye is repeated beside a sketch of a door, while 3 small triangles appear beneath a description of a forest path. The marks do not decorate the pages, they guide them. As you lean closer, the letters seem to form a second conversation, written quietly around the first. The book becomes less like a catalogue and more like a room with concealed passages. Rain taps the shack roof with a patient, irregular rhythm, and the open pages remain undisturbed beneath the warm light. The candle flame wavers across unfamiliar symbols, stretching them into long, thin shadows that tremble over the wood. Near your hand, the paper feels dry and fibrous, raised slightly where the black ink has dried heavily. A faint smell of dust, wax, and old timber rests in the room, softened by the damp air pressing against the windows. Somewhere below, a floorboard answers the weather with a small settling creak. The sound fades into the rain, leaving only the quiet impression of a building resting around you. A torch lies on the desk, its metal casing cool and faintly mottled. When you switch it on, its soft click seems unusually clear in the dark room. Dipper turns the pages slowly, comparing the signs in the margins with symbols found elsewhere in Gravity Falls. The same shapes recur across pages, doors, objects, and the closing credits, as though one hand has marked the town from its hidden rooms to its public stories. A symbol resembling an eye appears on a wooden panel beneath the shack, then again on a sealed door deep within the forest. A spiral can be found beside a journal entry, and later on an object whose purpose remains uncertain. The repetition changes the meaning of each individual mark. One sign could be a flourish, but several signs become a language. Dipper begins to understand that the town has been arranged around patterns that wait for patient eyes. The journal does not merely describe mysteries. It belongs to the same system of symbols that creates them. Cold rain gathers along the roof tiles, and narrow streams slide down the window glass in wavering lines. The room carries the gentle scent of wet earth from the forest beyond the walls, mixed with the dry odor of paper warmed by the lamp. Candlelight settles on the desk, then withdraws as the flame bends in a passing draft. Each symbol seems to float briefly before returning to the grain of the page. The ink has a dull, almost velvety surface where it has soaked into the rough fibers. Beneath the desk, Darkness gathers around the legs, hiding small objects and stray curls of dust. The forest gives no clear sound tonight, only the muffled movement of branches and the distant hush of water. You remain inside that stillness, while the pages preserve their patient, secret geometry. A simple substitution begins to reveal itself beneath the drawings, and Dipper tests the letters one by one against the repeated symbols. Some messages in gravity falls use Caesar ciphers, an old method in which each letter shifts by a fixed number of places through the alphabet. The principle is simple enough to seem harmless, though a message remains hidden until the correct movement is found. Dipper shifts the letters, first by one place, then by 3, and finally by a number suggested by a mark in the margin. The scattered characters resolve into a sentence about hidden cracks and an observing eye. The wording is spare, almost architectural, describing openings in walls and a presence that watches from beyond them. The journal uses this modest device to make the familiar world feel uncertain. Even plain writing can become a door when its order is quietly changed. The candle flame narrows when the draft passes, sending a pale ribbon of light across the coded line. Rain taps the shack roof above you, sometimes softly and sometimes with a heavier touch of drops gathering in the gutters. The pages remain open, their corners held down by a smooth stone collected from the lakeshore. Beneath the stone, paper fibers have curled slightly with age, giving the journal a low, uneven texture. The torch rests beside a stack of ordinary notebooks, and its switch waits beneath your fingers. When you turn it on, the symbols brighten without losing their strangeness. Light travels across the ink, revealing small changes in pressure where the writer's hand moved quickly. The room seems built from layered shadows, with every surface holding something just beyond immediate recognition. The decoded warning changes Dipper's understanding of the person who wrote the journal. The author's codes suggest that discovery was feared, not merely inconvenient, and that the book was concealed from a specific threat. Several notes refer to keeping secrets from another person, using careful phrases that avoid names while revealing anxiety. One entry advises concealment beneath ordinary objects, while another warns that the information could be dangerous in the wrong hands. These are not the instructions of someone recording wonders for the pleasure of remembrance. They belong to a person who expected pursuit, interference, or betrayal. Dipper sees that the journal was hidden because its contents mattered to someone who wished to find it. The mystery grows from a strange book into a question about the person who wrote it. Every coded margin now carries the pressure of a life lived under observation. The air around the desk has cooled, although the candle continues to give off a small and steady warmth. Wax has collected at the base of the flame, forming a pale ridge that catches the light like a low wall. Rainwater threads down the glass, joining and separating as it follows the uneven surface. From the roof comes a soft drumming, while inside the shack the silence holds between each distant creak. The journal smells faintly of leather, smoke, and the mineral scent of old cupboards. A crease near the binding catches against your thumb, and the paper resists before turning. Under the lamp, the ink looks nearly black, but its edges soften into brown where time has touched it. The darkness outside seems close enough to press against the walls, yet the desk remains a small, sheltered island. Journal 3 is part of a set with Journal 1 and Journal 2, and the 3 volumes together form a larger structure. Each book contains different observations, different absences, and different hints about the history of Gravity Falls. Their separation suggests that knowledge was divided deliberately, perhaps to prevent one discovery from exposing every other secret at once. The journals are central to the larger mythology of the series because they connect the creatures, the symbols, the hidden experiments, and the town's older stories. When Dipper compares their pages, he finds not a single straight account, but a broken history whose pieces still recognize one another. A missing page in one journal can become a warning in another. A symbol first encountered as a curiosity later appears beside a name. The books are objects within the story, yet they also provide the grammar by which the story can be understood. The desk carries the faint warmth of the lamp, while the corners of the room remain cool and blue. Dampness has darkened the wooden window frame, leaving a thin line of moisture where the glass meets the sill. A candle flame wavers across unfamiliar symbols, and the moving brightness gives the impression that the marks are breathing slowly. The rough paper makes a quiet rasp each time a page is turned, followed by the softer settling of the sheet. Outside, rain moves over the roof in overlapping patterns, like fingers brushing across a large instrument. The torch beam lies across the floorboards, narrow and pale, showing dust caught in the cracks. Each small sound remains separate for a moment before blending into the calm machinery of the night. Later in the story, Gideon Gleeful seeks the journal's knowledge, recognizing that their information offers power beyond the ordinary limits of the town. His interest is not gentle curiosity, because he wants the secrets contained in the books to strengthen his position. Gideon understands that the journals are more than records of unusual creatures. They are keys to relationships, hidden forces, and concealed weaknesses. The pursuit of the volumes makes the author's fear seem reasonable, since knowledge can become dangerous when controlled by someone seeking influence. Dipper's possession of Journal 3, therefore, carries a quiet responsibility, even when he is too young to describe it clearly. The book has traveled through secrecy, loss, and concealment before arriving in his hands. Its pages preserve information, but they also preserve the danger surrounding that information. The rain softens until individual drops can be heard only when they strike the metal gutter outside. A cool current moves through the room, carrying the smell of soaked pine and dark soil from the forest. The candle flame steadies, then tilts towards the window as though following an invisible path. Ink fills the shallow grooves of the page, and its uneven surface catches the light in small, dull glints. The paper's edges have become soft with handling, while the center remains firm beneath the drawings. Somewhere in the shack, a pipe gives a quiet knock and then falls silent. The roof continues to shelter the room, though the weather makes its presence known above you. Across the desk, the three journals seem to rest like stones placed carefully beside one another. The closing credits deepen the pattern, because the series itself places ciphers and symbols in its episode credits. These details extend the journal's language beyond the story's visible action, allowing the final moments of an episode to contain another layer of information. A viewer who studies the credits can find marks that resemble those scattered through the journals and around the town. The symbols recur with enough purpose to suggest that the world has been designed as a connected field of clues. Dipper's attention to margins prepares him to recognize the same habit in the larger series. What appears after the story has ended may still belong to the story's hidden architecture. The journal teaches him to read borders, and the closing credits reward that same careful reading. In Gravity Falls, the edge of a page and the edge of an episode can both conceal a message. A thin glow from the candle crosses the desk and rests upon a small drawing of an eye. Its shape is simple, with a dark center and several short lines surrounding it. Nearby, rain makes a faint silver veil across the window, and the forest beyond becomes a mass of softened trunks. Black ink has settled into the grooves of rough paper, leaving the symbol slightly raised beneath your fingertips. The room smells of old wood, extinguished ash, and the clean dampness that enters after rainfall. You switch the torch off again, and the soft click fades almost immediately into the roof's muted tapping. Shadows collect beneath the open covers, but the written lines remain visible. Nothing moves with urgency, and the quiet seems to make every concealed detail more patient. Dipper begins to ask what kind of person could have written so much while hiding so carefully. The creatures remain astonishing, but the author's choices become more revealing than the creatures themselves. A note crossed out twice may show more fear than a detailed drawing of a monster. A sentence about secrecy may explain why a page has been torn away. A repeated eye may represent surveillance, memory, or the author's awareness that another person was always nearby. The book's codes suggest that the author feared discovery, and the fear gives the journal a human center. Dipper is no longer searching only for the next strange thing in the woods. He is searching for the history of a mind that observed the town, recorded its dangers, and divided its knowledge among 3 volumes. The mystery now has an absent figure at its center. Night deepens around the shack, and the wet forest becomes almost entirely sound. Rain remains on the roof, but its rhythm has grown sparse, leaving broad spaces of silence between the drops. Candlelight trembles over the page whenever the air shifts near the door. A folded corner presses against the wooden desk, creating a small shadow like a dark wing. The rough paper feels warmer where the lamp has touched it and cooler near the binding. Your hand rests beside the journal without disturbing the arrangement of pencils, stones, and narrow scraps. From outside comes the occasional drip from a branch, falling long after the storm has passed. The room holds the faint fragrance of wax, leather, and rain-soaked bark. Even the darkness seems to have a texture, smooth near the window and grainy beside the shelves. The phrase "hidden cracks" leads Dipper towards a broader idea about gravity falls itself. The town's mysteries are not separate accidents scattered across an ordinary landscape. They share an author and a history. The central revelation is not that the town has one monster, but that its mysteries have been shaped by connected events and deliberate observation. A cryptid beside the lake, a strange door beneath the ground, and a coded line in a journal can belong to the same long design. The author may not have created every danger, yet the records show that someone understood their relationships. Dipper sees that the town has been accumulating secrets for longer than one summer. Its oddness is older than the shack, older than the journals, and older than the children who have begun to read them. The book becomes a map of memory, with each mark pointing towards a deeper layer of place and time. Mist rests against the windows, turning the candle's reflection into a blurred golden stain. The forest path outside has disappeared beneath wet leaves, and the branches form a dark lattice against the last trace of sky. A small drop falls from the roof and strikes the sill with a soft, hollow note. Paper fibers lift along the journal's edge, catching a thread of light before settling again. The ink looks almost blue where the flame touches it and nearly black where the shadows deepen. Beside the open book, the torch remains silent, its glass lens reflecting a thin crescent of brightness. The air has the cool, mineral quality of stone after rain. Around you, the shack rests with its familiar weight, while the hidden symbols make its walls feel older than they appear. The first season's initial arc around Gideon and the journals closes in Gideon Rises, when the struggle over knowledge becomes part of the town's visible conflict. The episode aired on 2 August 2013, placing the journal's secrets within a story that expanded from local oddities toward a broader mythology. Gideon Gleeful seeks the journal's knowledge because he senses that the books can alter the balance of power in Gravity Falls. Their pages contain information that cannot remain harmless when treated as property. Dipper's journal is therefore tied to the season's conclusion, not as a simple treasure, but as evidence of a history that several people wish to control. The finale closes the first season's initial arc around Gideon and the journals, while leaving the author's larger story unresolved. The code remains legible, the symbols remain present, and the town continues beneath them. The shack roof answers the night with a few last taps, each one softened by the thick timber overhead. Moisture glimmers along the window frame, and the candle flame leans gently towards the warmer center of the room. The pages lie open beneath its light, showing dark lines, pale paper, and small imperfections left by years of use. A mild smell of rain enters whenever the old boards shift in the wind. The desk surface is rough beneath your palm, marked by scratches that shine briefly when the flame passes. Dust rests in the corners, undisturbed except where the torch beam has crossed it. Beyond the walls, the forest seems to breathe through leaves and dripping branches. The night does not erase the symbols. It gives them a quieter background against which they can remain. On 29 July 2013, Gravity Falls was officially renewed for a second season, allowing the questions surrounding the journals and the author to continue. The renewal did not promise an endless chain of mysteries, because the series was planned as a finite story rather than an indefinitely continuing one. A second season could deepen the history without making the unknown expand forever. The journals offered a structure for that deepening, with Journal 1, Journal 2, and Journal 3 holding different portions of the same concealed world. Their pages allow the story to move backwards into the town's past while remaining close to the children's present. Dipper can read a warning written years earlier and still feel its meaning arrive in the room around him. The town's older history does not sit behind the summer like a finished chapter. It presses quietly through doors, symbols, objects, and coded words. The room has grown darker as the candle burns lower, though its light still reaches the central drawings. Rainwater slips from the eaves in occasional threads, and the sound is delicate against the broad silence of the forest. The paper has a faint, dry scent, like a cupboard opened after many winters. Along the margins, the black ink settles into grooves and small dents, preserving the speed and hesitation of the author's hand. The flame throws the observing eye across the desk, making its shadow larger than the drawing itself. You switch on the torch, and its soft click briefly interrupts the darkness before the beam steadies. Dust glows in the narrow cone, then vanishes when the light moves away. All around you, familiar objects keep their shapes, though the codes have altered the way they seem to belong together. The later story continues to unfold until the journal's knowledge becomes part of the explanation for why Gravity Falls is unusual. The 3 volumes do not solve every mystery by themselves, but they reveal that the mysteries have been witnessed, recorded, and connected. Their existence points towards an author whose work reaches across creatures, machines, symbols, and places hidden beneath the town. Dipper understands that finding Journal 3 was not the end of the search, because the book directs him towards the missing context of Journal 1 and Journal 2. The set forms a conversation between absences, where one volume answers a question another leaves unfinished. Gideon's desire for the journals reflects the same truth from a darker angle. Whoever holds the books can approach the town's buried structure, and whoever understands them can recognize the history beneath the spectacle. A pale strip of moonlight appears behind the clouds and lies across the wet glass. The candle flame continues its small movement, bending over drawings that remain strange even after their patterns have become familiar. The rough paper carries a slight ridge where a symbol has been pressed into it with unusual force. Beside the binding, the pages are darker from repeated handling, and the leather cover gives off a quiet smell of oil and age. Somewhere near the stairway, wood contracts with a subdued click. The roof no longer receives a storm, only the occasional touch of a remaining drop. The torch rests with its switch turned down, its metal surface cool against the desk. Light, rain, paper, and shadow gather around the journals without making them seem less secret. When the series ended in February 2016, its mysteries had reached their final form. The second season completed the series, bringing the story towards a conclusion rather than leaving the town in permanent suspension. That ending gives the codes a particular quality because they point towards discoveries that have a destination. The symbols in the credits, the warnings in the margins, and the hidden history of the journals all belong to a finite design. A finite story can still contain vast spaces of implication, just as a small town can hold centuries beneath one road. Dipper's attention to the margins becomes a way of understanding the whole work. The details matter because they are connected, and they are connected because someone has placed them there. Gravity Falls becomes larger, older, and more deliberate than it first appeared. The last rain has almost passed, leaving the roof damp and dark beneath the night. A candle flame wavers once more across unfamiliar symbols, then settles into a low, steady glow. The air smells of wet pine, old leather, and the faint mineral coolness carried from the lake. On the desk, the pages remain open, their fibers uneven beneath the marks of black ink. A torch beam briefly touches the margin and shows a tiny eye drawn between two lines of writing. You switch the torch off, and the room becomes deeper than before. Water falls from a branch outside, striking the ground with a sound too quiet to locate. The shack seems to hold its breath around the books, while the forest keeps the remaining secrets beneath its leaves. A real-world adaptation titled *Gravity Falls. Journal 3 was published on 26 July 2016, extending the fictional journal into a book that could be held beyond the screen. The published book includes pages seen in the show as well as additional material, allowing familiar symbols to exist beside new fragments of the author's record. Its physical form echoes the object Dipper studies, with worn-looking pages, drawings, warnings, and concealed information arranged as though the journal had crossed into the ordinary world. The adaptation does not make the mysteries less mysterious. It gives them another surface on which to gather. Readers can follow the known pages and find further notes around them, much as Dipper follows the margins around a central drawing. Journal 3, therefore, becomes both story object and real-world artifact. Its publication preserves the feeling that the book has continued traveling after the summer has ended. The candle has burned low enough for wax to form a quiet pool around its base. Light moves across the paper in a narrow band, revealing pencil marks, ink stains, and the raised grain of the fibers. Rain taps the shack roof only once or twice, and then the sound is replaced by dripping water along the eaves. The window has cleared enough to show the dark line of the forest, with mist lying between the trunks. The room's cool air touches your face, while the desk remains warm near the candle. Leather creaks faintly when the journal cover shifts against the wood. No scent is strong enough to dominate the others, and wax, damp earth, paper, and timber settle into one calm atmosphere. The symbols remain where they were, waiting without urgency. Dipper closes the journal only after tracing the final set of marks back to the first ones he noticed. The observing eye, the hidden cracks, the Caesar cipher, and the warnings about dangerous knowledge now belong to one continuous pattern. He understands that the author was not simply collecting monsters, but trying to preserve a history that another person might misuse. The concealed volumes and coded passages all show a writer working under pressure. Journal 3 cannot be separated from Journal 1 and Journal 2 because each book carries part of the same guarded account. What began as a strange book has become evidence of intention. Beyond the walls, Gravity Falls remains quiet, but its quietness now seems full of remembered voices. The final warmth of the candle rests upon the closed cover, touching its edges with a thin amber line. Paper settles inside the journal, page against page, while the ink remains pressed into the rough surfaces beneath it. Damp air moves through the room and carries away the last trace of smoke. The roof holds a soft, residual murmur as water leaves the shingles and disappears into the earth. The torch lies dark beside the books, its lens reflecting a small point of candlelight. Outside, branches drip slowly, and the forest path disappears beneath overlapping leaves. The lake is somewhere beyond the trees, holding the night in its broad, unseen surface. All these textures remain together: paper, wood, rain, leather, and shadow, while the journal rests quietly at the center. The summer closes with the knowledge that Gravity Falls is larger, older, and more deliberate than it first appeared. Its mysteries share an author and a history, even when their surfaces look unrelated. A code can point towards a door, a symbol can recall a forgotten page, and a journal can preserve the fear of someone who expected to be found. The town does not become simple when its secrets connect. It becomes more deeply inhabited. Dipper's reading has shown that the margins may hold as much meaning as the central drawings, and that silence around a fact can be part of the fact itself. Gideon's pursuit, the three journals, the closing credits, and the author's hidden warnings all belong to the same long arrangement. The story has an ending, yet the world it describes remains spacious enough for thought. Beneath the dark trees, the symbols wait in their places, and the history of Gravity Falls continues quietly through the night. Outside the shack, the clouds thin over the forest and leave a faint brightness above the distant hills. Wet leaves hold the last light in small, dull reflections, while the branches make a dark pattern against the sky. Inside, the closed journal gives off the dry scent of leather and paper, softened by the coolness after rain. The candle flame lowers until it is little more than a golden bead, and the shadows gather gently around the desk. A final drop falls from the roof, followed by another from a branch farther away. The room returns to its ordinary shapes, though the ordinary now includes hidden doors, coded warnings, and histories beneath the floor. The pages remain safe within their covers, carrying names and places through darkness. Gravity Falls rests among the trees, larger than silence and quieter than sleep.